Roman slave owner. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 251, War, Part 2. The enemy is attacking, Alexander said with a serious face. Attack! Warriors of Pontus, Mithridates shouted. The same trumpet sounded and spread far away. A messenger rode a war horse and ran around, spreading his orders. The huge Pontic army shouted loudly and rushed forward like a tide. What worried Levi the most was the chariots of the Pontic Central Army. Hundreds of chariots were lined up in a row, and slowly moved forward under the pull of two war horses. There were sharp sickles on both sides of the chariots, shining coldly under the sunlight. Order the Central Army to stop advancing, and the archers and slingers to move forward, Levi said. The military trumpet sounded and the legion flags waved. After receiving Levi's order, the Central Army immediately stopped advancing and put up shields. One by one, the archers and slingers walked out of the army and lined up in a neat team. They skillfully strung the crossbows and put arrows on them. The first row squatted, the second row stood, and then aimed at the chariots that were accelerating in the distance. Hundreds of chariots formed a front of nearly 1 kilometer, rolling up a lot of dust, and rushed towards the Roman army faster and faster. If it was a new soldier who had just entered the battlefield, he would be terrified to see this scene. But these Roman soldiers had been fighting for more than 4 months and did not take it seriously at all. Remember to shoot those horses, don't care about the people on the chariots, some centurions said. And the crossbowmen immediately aimed at the horses pulling the chariots. Shoot! Shoot! When they found that the chariots were within range, the centurions gave orders to shoot arrows. An arrow flew out of the string and flew towards the horses. After shooting, the 2 rows of crossbowmen standing in the front quickly retreated and prepared for the next round of shooting. Due to the huge weight of the chariot, the speed was not fast. Some of the arrows hit the target and pierced the horses, but the horses were not affected too much, and their huge bodies made them more able to withstand such damage. Rounds of arrows were shot at the horses. As the distance got closer, the penetrating power of the crossbows became greater. A large number of crossbow arrows were shot at the horses from both sides, from only a few arrows inserted into the horses to the whole arrows being sunk into the horses. Some horses were hit in the vital parts, wailing and falling to the ground, and then dragged down the entire chariot, which could only be submerged in the rain of arrows on the spot, and then fell down helplessly. Although some horses were hit by several arrows and a lot of blood kept flowing from them, they still moved forward with difficulty. At this time, some crossbowmen had retreated, revealing the Macaro Island slingers behind them. Macaro Island slingers are the best slingers in the entire Mediterranean. They have received strict slinging training since they were young. Only slingers who hit the target once can eat, otherwise they cannot eat. In order to eat, each slinger has practiced the best skills. They can quickly hit the target with stones in the shortest time, with only 1 rotation of the sling belt. Soon, stones flew towards the horses. Many of the horses that were already seriously injured fell down immediately after being hit by countless stones. After throwing all the stones in their hands, all the slingers immediately retreated behind the army. At this time, some horses were still charging forward, but their speed had greatly decreased. Kill! The centurion and the legion shouted loudly. With their roar, the Roman soldiers standing in the front immediately threw the lead balls in their hands and the lead balls hanging on the shields at the fastest speed. At the same time, javelins flew over their heads and flew towards the horses. One by one, the lead balls hit the staggering horses, smashing their brains and piercing their bodies with javelins. They could only make wailing sounds and fell to the ground helplessly, leaving the soldiers on the chariot with a look of horror. "Raise the spears," said a centurion. After receiving the order, the Roman soldiers behind immediately raised 4-meter-long spears. The spears were like a forest, pointing diagonally forward. The standard equipment of each Roman soldier not only includes a short sword, a shield, a javelin, but also a spear. Whether in the east or the west, ancient soldiers need to master 2 or more weapons. These spears were specially made by Levi to deal with chariots, and they are much longer than standard spears. At this time, only a few chariots can rush to the front, facing the forest of spears. The war horses can't stop the momentum and all crash into the forest of spears. For a while, blood and flesh flew everywhere, and wailing was heard everywhere. All the war horses were pierced by the spears and fell to the ground. The chariots were slightly less powerful, but they still crushed some fallen horses and soldiers. "Attack," said a military tribune. After receiving the order, the Roman soldiers quickly attacked forward, killed all the Pontic soldiers on the chariots, and then killed the enemy. Seeing this, Levi breathed a sigh of relief. Without chariots, this war is at least half won. On the contrary, Mithridates' face changed greatly. How could this be? Building these chariots would consume a lot of national strength, but I didn't expect that they would be broken by the enemy so easily. Alexander sighed softly. Perhaps the era of chariots is really over. What reassured Levi the most was the central army. The Roman army was extremely powerful and could often defeat enemies several times its size. Otherwise, Lucullus would not have fought from Asia to Pontus with the strength of 3 Roman regiments and allies. What's more, his current strength is not only far greater than that of Lucullus at the time, but also equipped with a large number of steel swords. Sure enough, the Roman legion did not disappoint him. Facing the Pontic army that imitated itself, they cooperated tacitly and had strong combat power. They soon beat the enemy army that was twice their size back step by step. Compared with the great victory of the central army, the 2 wings were very bad. Cavalry has always been the weakness of the Romans, and the strength of the Roman cavalry has always been weak. The same was true for the 2,000 Thracian cavalry. They were soon entangled by the barbarian cavalry, which outnumbered them. The 2 sides launched rounds of attacks, but the Roman army was even on the verge of collapse. At this time, a cavalry team of several thousand suddenly launched an attack on the left wing of the Roman army. Facing the simultaneous attack from the front and the left, the Thracians on the left wing quickly panicked. Hold on, don't be afraid, and attack quickly," Senes shouted. This time he was also assigned to command a brigade in the Thracian army. His brigade happened to be on the right side of the Thracians and was not attacked by the cavalry for the time being. Chapter 252, Battle, Part 3. But his order did not seem to reassure the Thracians. The barbarians took the opportunity to break into the Thracians, and the Thracian army was about to be defeated. At this time, the military trumpet sounded behind. At this time, the flag officer said, "Sir, the deputy general asked us to form a circular formation." "Quickly form a circular formation. Form a circular formation with me as the center," Senes said calmly. He was also a veteran of many battles and knew that it was useless to panic. The circular formation was the best defensive formation when the army was close to collapse. Fortunately, Senes explained various formations to them on the way from Thrace to here, and these Thracians finally understood what they should do. Just like finding the backbone, they united around Senes and began to defend facing outward. Although their small round shields could not compare with the large shields of the Romans, the curved short swords could still exert great power in such a narrow space, and they firmly protected the general flag in the middle. "Hold on, believe us, we will definitely win. General Levi is the strongest triumphant general in Rome." Senes desperately cheered them up. The precarious situation on both wings finally reached Levi. Although the central army was winning victory after victory, it would take some time before it could completely win. "Let the 11th Legion support the left wing, and the 12th Legion support the right wing," Levi said. "Yes, General." Upon hearing this, several heralds immediately galloped towards the 11th and 12th Legions on Pegasus and passed the order to them. The 11th and 12th Legions immediately set out to support the 2 wings. The Thracians, who received support, quickly stabilized the situation and even showed signs of counterattack. After more than half an hour of fighting, the central army of Pontus finally collapsed. Even if Mithridates dropped the reserve troops, it would only slightly stop the trend of collapse. Perhaps soon, those reserve troops will also collapse. "This is impossible. This is impossible," Mithridates murmured. "He has worked hard for so many years and even learned the tactics of the Romans. Why did they still lose?" "You know, His infantry is nearly twice the enemy's and his cavalry is more than 3 times the enemy's. Alexander was silent. Actually, he had already had this premonition when the war started. The Romans were too powerful. The Pontic people were no match for them. To their surprise, it was not the center army that collapsed next, but the barbarians on the 2 wings that were fighting against the Roman army. Although these barbarians were strong in individual force, they had no discipline and were no match for the well-trained Romans. After the barbarians were defeated, the Roman legions immediately swept to the center. Mithridates' face turned pale and he almost fainted from his horse. How could this happen? How could this happen? They no longer had any reserve troops. Even an idiot knew what would happen next. The Pontic army in the center would be attacked from the front and the 2 wings and would soon collapse. The Pontic soldiers threw down their swords and shields and ran away. "Your Majesty, let's go first," Dionysus said in panic. "Go? Where to go?" Mithridates said in despair. He was defeated by Sulla first, and then by Levi, both times with an absolute advantage in military strength. This made him discouraged. Could it be that the Romans were his nemesis? "We have ships in the Euxine Sea, Black Sea, and we can take the ships back to Pontus first. The Romans will winter camp, and we have a winter to gather the army, and then unite with Armenia and Parthia, and then fight them," Dionysus said. In fact, Pontus had a military alliance with Armenia and Parthia, and the king of Armenia was his son-in-law, so it was no problem for them to send troops. "He is right, Your Majesty. The current situation is irreversible. Let's go first." At this time, Alexander also persuaded. Mithridates hesitated for a while, finally nodded, and then fled north with his guards. Mithridates' departure was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Seeing the king's flag go away, the Pontic army and the barbarians lost their fighting spirit and fled. The Roman army began a big chase. An hour later, the battlefield was filled with cheers. Diotarus was full of flattery around Levi. If this battle was won, the restoration of Galatia would be just around the corner. Levi was also very excited. After winning this battle, the next battle would be much easier to fight. Lucullus also looked at him with a complicated expression. It was Sulla and Marius again. "Order the army to pursue at full speed. Don't give them the opportunity to gather and counterattack," Levi said. "Yes, General. Yes, General." In the Senate of Rome, Aelius Lamia was accusing Levi of his behavior in Asia. After receiving a letter from his brother, Lamia was so angry about Levi's behavior that he was furious. As long as this kind of usury is done well, foreigners can be treated as their own cows for life, and even cows can be eaten with skin and bones. But now it has all been destroyed by Levi. According to his estimate, the loss is at least more than 3 million dinars per year. This is 3 million dinars. Thinking of this, Lamia's heart was bleeding. With the support of some nobles who were also damaged, he, as the representative of those usurers, filed a complaint against Levi. "Dear Senators, I believe you all know what happened in Asia. The order of Governor Liberius seriously harmed the interests of Roman merchants there and caused immeasurable losses." Listening to Lamia's speech, many senators were not interested, and even showed disgust. At this time, Rome was also a society that valued farmers and despised merchants, not to mention those usurers. No matter in which country in ancient and modern times, usury is regarded as a vampire, so they don't want to get involved with Lamia. Even if they secretly let their own spokespersons do these things, on the surface they must draw a clear line with usury. This is definitely a matter that damages the honor of the nobles and will cause tremendous damage to the family and personal career. After finishing his speech, he looked at the elders with an expectant look, hoping to gain support from the elders. What disappointed him was that most of the elders were indifferent. Even those whose interests were damaged had flickering eyes and did not openly agree with him. This made him curse inwardly. What a hypocritical bunch of guys. Sarabeo looked at Lamia with an extremely cold look. This damn guy, the head of the family, was fighting bravely for Rome on the front line, but he stabbed him in the back. Chapter 253 Legislation. Fortunately, the head of the family had already written a letter to him, and he was prepared for this matter. He coughed lightly, and then said, "Lamia, as far as I know, Sulla contracted Asia's tax revenue for 5 years to you for 240 million sesterces. and you have earned no less than 1 billion sesterces from Asia. Am I right?" Hearing this, the Senate was in an uproar. They didn't expect that they would make so much money in Asia. Many elders looked at Lamia with a strange or contemptuous look. They were really a group of greedy vampires. Lamia blushed slightly, and then said, "I don't know about this. I didn't receive so much money myself." Dear elders, here is a report on usury provided by Asia Governor Liberius to the Senate. Due to the long journey, it has just been delivered to me. I hope you can take a look at it, Sarabio said. After speaking, he handed the report to the elders for review. After the elders took the report, they read it one by one. According to this report, it has been more than 8 years since Sulla levied taxes on Asia, but many Asian people still have not paid off their debt. Some of the poor Asians are displaced, and some are sold into slavery. They call us Romans greedy vampires. But some people are still not satisfied. Not only have they earned 4 times the profit of the original tax contract, but they also want to suck the blood of the Asian people for the rest of their lives. Sarabio spoke generously. The elders nodded repeatedly after hearing this. No matter what they thought in their hearts, at least they must pretend to hate the usurers on the surface. This is the political correctness of Rome. Lamia's face was flushed. He looked at the allies who bewitched him, but found that they were watching his nose with their eyes and their hearts with their noses. They had no intention of coming out to help him speak. This made him extremely annoyed. Could it be that he was sold out by these damn guys? General Livius found that a large number of Asians hated the Romans so much that they even hoped that the Pontic army would win the war. This was a very terrible thing. That's why he made this suggestion to Governor Liberius. So I think Governor Liberius's decision is not only legal and reasonable, but should also be commended by the Senate. What do you think, senators? Sarabio said. Lamia was so angry that she trembled all over. I don't care if you want to be a moral gentleman, but don't use my money to do it. That's 3 million dinars a year. I think what Senator Sarabio said is very correct. The interest rates of those usurious loans are indeed too high. The interest rates of usury need to be restricted. Consul Cotta spoke first. After this period of performance, Cotta inherited the family's usual style and became the representative of the civilian faction, often safeguarding the interests of the civilian faction. I also think that Governor Liberius did the right thing. Those usurers are really too greedy. The senators spoke out one after another and expressed their support for Liberius, which made Lamia extremely disappointed. Sarabio smiled. It seemed that this matter was not a problem. I think we should pass a law to limit the interest rate of usury in the provinces of Rome, Cotta said. Hearing this, many people were stunned. Even Sarabio was no exception. He did express his hope that Cotta would support him before the meeting, but he did not expect that he would have such an idea. There were countless nobles and knights standing behind those usurers. If the interest rate was limited, it would be a death sentence for them. Consul Cotta, are you serious? Lamia asked in shock. Of course, I hope to convene a citizens' assembly to legislate on this matter. I think the interest rate of usury should not exceed 1% per month, Cotta said. Sarabio could not help but frown. Cotta did not tell him about this before the meeting. If this law is passed, will many people hate Levi as well? I think this matter should be carefully considered. This matter involves too many people. It is better not to make a hasty decision, Sarabio said. He was Levi's spokesperson in the Senate, and his meaning was Levi's meaning, which showed that Levi did not want to get involved in this matter. Seeing this, many people breathed a sigh of relief. Levi was still very powerful. As long as he disagreed, there was still room for redemption. Sarabio is right. Let's discuss this matter again. It's too hasty to legislate so soon. One after another, the senators spoke, and some even supported Levi just now. Cotta looked at them helplessly. These guys were really hypocritical. I have decided that I will submit this matter to the citizens' assembly, Cotta insisted. Cotta, are you sure you want to do this? At this time, Dumagus said. Yes, Cotta said. For a while, the Senate was noisy. Some supported it, and some opposed it. If this bill is really submitted to the citizens' assembly, it is very likely to be passed. No citizen likes those who lend money at high interest rates, except for those nobles and knights who lend money. At this time, a civilian tribune walked in. Dear senators, Livius's messenger wants to see you and says he has news from the front." Upon hearing this, the chaotic Senate immediately quieted down. "Let them in quickly, maybe we have won the battle," Cerebio said excitedly. Soon a military tribune came in, with scars on his face, looking extremely fierce. It was Cinnas. Looking at the hundreds of senators in the Senate, he seemed a little nervous, but after discovering Aeneas, he immediately straightened his back, and he could not show his weakness in front of Aeneas anyway. "Dear senators, at Lake Isine, General Livius led the Roman legions to defeat the 300,000 Pontic army. 50,000 enemies were killed and more than 100,000 enemies were captured. Now General Livius has entered Bithynia and is marching towards Galaxia," Cinnas said loudly. Upon hearing this, the Senate exclaimed, "This is simply unbelievable. We actually defeated the 300,000-man Pontic army, which is an enemy of 50 legions. God bless. Today must be Rome's lucky day. We should offer sacrifices to the gods. That's right, we should hold a grand Thanksgiving ceremony." The senators discussed it, and under the guidance of some people intentionally or unintentionally, no one mentioned the previous topic. Cotta was a little disappointed, but he would not give up. Later, the Senate unanimously decided to hold a grand Thanksgiving ceremony to thank the gods for this victory. After leaving the Senate, Lamia stopped Cerebio. Chapter 254 Response. "Respected Senator Cerebio, you and General Levi will not support Cotta's proposal, right?" Lamia asked nervously. Cerebio glanced at him coldly and said disdainfully, "It depends on your performance." Lamia's face was very ugly. Compared with Levi, Cotta was more hateful. Levi only cut off their financial resources once, but Cotta wanted to completely smash their golden rice bowl. Lamia tried to force a smile. "As long as you can oppose Cotta's proposal, our grievances will be resolved." "You are not qualified to have a grudge with General Levi," Cerebio snorted coldly. It was urgent, but Lamia still didn't recognize the situation. What an idiot. Lamia was furious. He, Lamia, was a well-known figure in Rome, but he didn't expect to be despised by Cerebio. "Tell me who asked you to come to the Senate to accuse Liberius." "I promise not to let our people support Cotta in the Citizens' Assembly," Cerebio said. "Are you going to seek revenge on them?" Lamia looked around and found that many senators did not leave, but watched them from a distance, and quickly gave up the idea of telling them off. Yes, Cerebio also discovered this. "That's impossible. If you want to go against us, it's up to you." Lamia sneered and left. "You really don't know how to live or die. You think I don't know if you don't tell me. Machiavelli's people have been watching you all these days." Looking at his departing back, Cerebio thought coldly. At this time, Hortensius came over. "Cerebio, today's matter has nothing to do with me. I assure you that I am absolutely not involved in it," Hortensius whispered. "I believe you." Cerebio glanced at him and said, "Forget about Asia's matter. I don't want any compensation. I hope that if I want to be a consul one day, Livius will support me." Hortensius said, "I will convey your words to General Livius," Cerebio said. Hortensius nodded and left. Soon, several other senators came to Cerebio and told him that they were not involved in the matter. They may not have invested much and did not want to be misunderstood by Livy. Cerebio believed them on the surface, but in fact, he only believed in Marcian's investigation. The last person to leave the Senate was Consul Cotta, and Cerebio took the initiative to walk over. "You didn't tell me that you wanted to legislate to restrict usury," Cerebio said somewhat dissatisfied. "I'm very sorry, but my term is about to end. I hope to make achievements. I don't want to leave the consulship just like that," Cotta said with a smile. "This will offend many people," Cerebio said, "but I think it's worth it," Cotta said. Looking at Cotta with a determined face, Cerebio was a little envious. Cotta knew what he was pursuing. He wanted to pass this usury restriction bill named after himself. Although this offended many nobles and knights, it also established great prestige for the Cotta family among the people. In this way, even without Levi's help, his brother could become consul with this bill, and the Cotta family could benefit from this bill for generations, making the Cotta family more famous. At this time, Cerebio was eager to become consul. He also hoped to pass a bill named after himself like Cotta, and he wanted to make the Sarabeo family proud of him. "Will you help me?" Kata asked. "In fact, you will succeed without my help, right?" Sarabeo said with a smile. Kata smiled and left. A banquet was being held at Sarabeo's house, and all the elders of Levi gathered here to discuss how to deal with the next situation. Sinas had not left Rome yet and was also invited to participate in the party. In addition, current officials such as Aeneas and Cycydus also attended. Everyone, just now Marcian has introduced the forces that have been in frequent contact with Lamia recently. Two of them said they were not involved, but I can't believe them yet. I will ask them for confirmation next. Sarabeo said, "Now it is certain that there are three involved." Looking at these three families, Sarabeo had a headache, because one of them was the Claudius Pulcher family. He had heard vaguely that Levi and Claudia had a relationship beyond friendship. Let's not talk about the Pulcher family first, let's talk about the other two. One is Biso, and the other is Viles. Sarabeo decisively decided to cross out the Pulcher family first and focus on the other two. As for whether to deal with the Pulcher family, let Levi make the decision. Viles is a retainer of the Metellus family and the Grand Chancellor next year. If we deal with Viles, will we have a full-scale conflict with the Metellus family? Aeneas said, even if he is a retainer of Metellus, so what? Since he dares to do something behind the scenes, he must bear the consequences of his actions. Sarabeo said coldly, you must remember that we do not need to fear the Metellus family, but the Metellus family should fear us. Hearing this, the elders were extremely proud. After all these years of continuous development of Levi, his strength far exceeded that of the Metellus family. If the Metellus family was not an old noble family with extensive connections among the nobles, Metellus would not be their opponent at all. But Pompey is Metellus' son-in-law, a senator reminded. This made Sarabeo frown. He was very clear about the alliance between Levi, Pompey and Crassus, and he even participated in it personally. The alliance of the three giants was his most important alliance. Once Pompey was involved, things would be difficult to handle. Don't worry about this. I will communicate with Menmus. Sarabeo said, we have collected evidence of corruption when Viles was the quaestor. We just need to find someone to sue him. Cicero, are you willing to be our defense lawyer? No problem. At this time, Cicero, who was sitting aside and had little presence, said. Sarabeo nodded. We must not only deprive him of his position as Chief Justice, but also exile him to let him know the consequences of stabbing the master in the back. As for Piso was Sulla's deputy general and had a good relationship with many senators of Sulla's faction. He was definitely not an easy character to deal with. Aeneas, you draft a bill. Isn't Cato going to convene a citizens' assembly? You proposed a bill to impeach Piso at the citizens' assembly, on the grounds that he, as a senator, secretly intervened in the usury affairs of Asia, which violated Roman law. These days I will mobilize all public opinion to prepare for the impeachment of Piso. Sarabeo said. Chapter 255, Making Money. I understand, Aeneas said quickly. As for Lamia, we have collected evidence of his illegal activities. At least we can drive him out of Rome. We need your help in this regard, Cicero. Sarabeo said. Okay, Cicero said helplessly. Since joining Livy's army, he has been more and more inclined to become Livy's royal lawyer. While Sarabeo and others were busy dealing with those nobles and knights, Livy had already led his army into Bithynia. He did not encounter much resistance along the way. After all, the old king intended to give Bithynia to Rome. Livy entered Bithynia completely legitimately, and then marched into Galatia. Because of the king Diotarus, surrenders were everywhere, and they successfully occupied the entire territory of Galatia. At this time, winter was also coming, and Livy had been hesitating whether to go to winter camp. In a mansion in the capital of Galatia, Livy listened to Lysa's report. Diotarus has issued an order to the whole country to recruit 30,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry. The recruitment will be completed within 2 months, but it will take some time to complete the training. Lysa said. Livy nodded. Western expeditions have always been like this, and they pay great attention to the joining of allies. For example, in Alexander's expedition, the troops grew more and more, and the tribes along the way were constantly joining. Hannibal was the same. He absorbed a large number of Gauls north of Italy and some allies of Rome in Italy at that time. Since the expedition was outside, he also started to absorb allies. In addition, we are training those Thracians, but they are naturally lax, and it will take a long time to complete the training. It doesn't matter, we have 3 months to train them, Levi said. There is another news. Lysis's face showed a trace of hesitation. Someone in the army is very dissatisfied with you. Why is that? Levi asked in surprise. He asked himself that he had fought well in this period. Although the Romans had casualties, the casualties were far less than those of the enemy. Moreover, there were basically no battles in the attack on Bithynia and Galaxia. Why would someone be dissatisfied? Some people think that those cities should not surrender. They want spoils of war, Lysis said. Levi was speechless. So this was the reason. It's just that Bithynia was already a Roman province, and he didn't want to kill people in Bithynia. As for Galaxia, it was also his own protectorate. Of course, he had to protect the interests of Galaxia. Unexpectedly, it caused dissatisfaction among the soldiers. It seems that he has to find a way to make money for the soldiers. Unexpectedly, he would be hijacked by the soldiers one day. Levi smiled bitterly. Go down and check what's going on. I will find a way to solve it. Yes, General, Lysis said happily. Since Caesar left, he felt that the sun was much brighter. Not long after, there was a sound of footsteps outside, and then the door was gently pushed open. Levi looked at it with some surprise. How could someone come in without notification? But soon he was surprised. Amelia, why are you here? The visitor turned out to be Levi's wife Amelia. She was wearing a white fur coat, and her face was a little red from the cold. I know a few sisters. They want to come and see their husbands, so they came together. And aren't you going to winter camp? There's no war. So what are you afraid of? Amelia said shyly. The fact is that she took the initiative to hint them. Of course she would never tell Levi this. Sisters? Which sisters? Levi asked curiously. For example, Aurelia, Elithea, and Amelia said several names in a row. These were the wives or relatives of Levi's lieutenants. Levi smiled bitterly. These people really know how to make trouble. It's very dangerous here. Sometimes there will be defeated troops robbing the road. I'm not afraid. We have guards to protect us, and I want a child, Amelia said, biting her lip. Want a child? Yes, Julia and Cybele both have one, but I don't. Of course I want one too, Amelia said as a matter of course. Levi secretly felt lucky that Momine went to the palace to see her father, otherwise it would be bad if she ran into him. It seems that I have to send someone to tell her not to come back for a few days. No problem, or we can make a little man now. Now, this is not good. I just got here. What does it matter? No. Then there was a scream in the room. 10,000 words omitted. The next day, Levi struggled to get up from the warm bed. Where are you going? Amelia asked. I'm going to find a way to make money for the soldiers, Levi said. Make money? Why? Amelia asked curiously. So Levi told her what happened yesterday, and Amelia almost laughed out loud. She didn't expect that Levi, a commander with outstanding military achievements, would be complained by his own soldiers. Then how do you plan to make money? This is a military secret, Levi said. Amelia couldn't help but wrinkle her lovely nose. She was so conceited. In fact, Levi really didn't want her to know. It was enough for her to know about these fighting and killing. There was no need to bring them home. By the way, Sarabio asked me to bring you a letter. At this time, Amelia remembered that she still had something important to do. It was all Levi's fault. She forgot everything yesterday. She glared at Levi, and Levi spread his hands. It was you who wanted the child. You can't blame me. Amelia ordered Menenia to take out their letter, and Levi immediately opened the letter and read it. Sarabio was reporting to him about the situation of Biso and others. Vils deprived the position of the elders, and for this reason, they and the Metellus family were almost at loggerheads. It was not easy to train a chief justice, but Levi abolished him. But Levi didn't care. He found that he seemed to be born in conflict with the Metellus family and always had all kinds of conflicts. As for Biso, he gave in to Sarabio and others, and with the pleas of many elders, Sarabio suggested to forgive him. After they did this, Biso's reputation was ruined and he could not recover, but in the end, it was still up to Levi to make the decision. If Levi wanted to punish him, he had to reply quickly because the citizens' assembly of Kota was about to be held. Levi thought about it and decided to agree. Although Biso had conflicts with him, it was not a deep hatred, so it was better not to punish him to death. Chapter 256. As for Lamia, he was driven out of Rome. Although Cerebio had someone prosecute him, for some reason, several senators who served as jurors changed their minds and only expelled him from Rome, but this was enough for him. Livius was generally satisfied with Cerebio's ability to do things. In addition, there was Cotta's matter. In addition to limiting the interest rate of usury, Cotta also wanted to reform the jury system, making the jury members 1/3 of the senators, knights and civilians. This is really a crazy guy. Livius shook his head and said he never thought that Cotta was such a fanatical civilian faction, which violated the interests of too many senators. Will you support him? Amelia asked. Cicero told him the general content of the letter. Because of Cotta's matter, Rome had been in turmoil, but Cotta's prestige was also rising. No, let him figure it out himself. Isn't he your ally? He became consul with my help. Livius said. What you said seems to make sense. Amelia pouted and said, okay, I'll go first. Levi left here soon. In a small town in Galatia, it has become a huge Roman military camp with tens of thousands of soldiers stationed. Although the weather is cold, the Thracians are still conducting various trainings. Spartacus sat on his bed, his face looking a little heavy. In the last war, they had to face enemies that far outnumbered them, so their losses were extremely serious. 32 soldiers in their village were killed and 16 were disabled. Seeing the soldiers who followed him out end up like this, he felt very uncomfortable. If they died to defend the tribe, it would be nothing, but they died for Rome, so what's the point? At this time, Aetius walked in. He was conducting an internal inspection, and his face immediately darkened when he came to the dormitory of Spartacus and others. Spartacus, is this your dormitory? Why don't you even fold your quilts? Do you want to wash underwear for other cavalry teams or clean the toilets? Aetius roared at Spartacus. It's okay that you didn't fold a quilt well, but you didn't even fold it. This is simply a disregard for military discipline. What's the point of folding the quilt like a square? Can it win a battle? Spartacus said with his hands spread out. Aetius was so angry that his face turned red. This guy was getting more and more excessive. It seemed that he had to be tough, otherwise how could he lead this team in the future? I don't care whether you understand it or not. You just need to know that it is the duty of a soldier to obey orders. Folding the quilt well is your #1 task now. If you don't fold the quilt well, go and clean the toilet for me, Aetius said loudly. Spartacus thought for a moment, then said, yes, sir. Seeing that Spartacus obeyed the order, Aetius nodded, then went to check the internal affairs of others, and started to mock those Thracians. Those Thracians were helpless about this, and even wanted to beat people up, but they didn't dare to do it after thinking about the consequences. After all, this is a military camp. A few days ago, a Thracian attacked the commander, and was beaten up and put in solitary confinement for a month. After he came out, he was a little crazy. From then on, people knew how terrible it was to be in solitary confinement. At this time, a guard came here. Sir, Commander Caesar wants to see you. I know, I'll be there right away. After saying that, Aetius left here. As soon as he left, there was a burst of ghosts and wolves in the dormitory. This damn guy finally left. Damn it, this kind of training is a joke. I would rather go to the battlefield than accept this kind of training. If my wife knew that I was punished for not folding the quilt properly, I would be laughed at for the rest of my life. A Thracian said, that's right, a man should show his true colors on the battlefield, not hide behind and fold the quilt. Someone else said. The Thracians kept complaining, but Spartacus thought about why the Roman army was so obsessed with folding quilts. It is said that this is training method that Livius came up with, and the soldiers trained by Levi were known as the most disciplined in Rome. Is this method really effective? Not long after, Aetius returned. Seeing this devil coming back, the faces of the people who were talking and laughing just now immediately became serious. I received an order from the top that there will be a military action tomorrow, Aetius said. Damn it, Do we have to fight in such a cold weather? Didn't we say we should camp in winter? Someone said dissatisfiedly. This is a good thing. Our target is very weak. We will break through their settlements and rob everything from them. Everyone will be sold as slaves, and all the soldiers who participate can share a sum of money. Isha said. So they want to share money. This is really great. I'll go. Count me in. I'm short of money recently. I want to go too. The Thracians who were complaining just now immediately smiled and wished that tomorrow would come immediately and they could rob to their heart's content. Aetius couldn't help but roll his eyes at these money-hungry guys. Spartacus asked, "Who are our targets?" "Some barbarians. They joined the army of Pontus. They must pay the price for their actions." Aetius said, "I'll go too." Spartacus thought for a while and said, "The next day, a group of Roman troops set out. Their target was the barbarians living in the northern Euxine Sea, Black Sea. This was a Thracian village, facing two large groups of Roman troops. The village's resistance was quickly destroyed. The bodies of the rebels were everywhere on the ground. A large number of Thracians were tied up like cattle and sheep. There were children and women crying everywhere. The Romans laughed wildly and robbed everything they saw: cattle, sheep, gold and silver jewelry. Although these had to be handed over, a large part of them would be divided into their hands. Spartacus was extremely angry. He thought the target was other ethnic groups, but he didn't expect it to be Thracians. He found Aetius was negotiating the price with several merchants. "Only 2 denarii for an adult male slave. Are you robbing? As long as these slaves are transported to Rome, the profit will be several times," Aetius said dissatisfiedly. "You also know that it is a long way to Rome to be transported to Rome, and there are storms on the sea. The ship may capsize. They need to eat and drink along the way. I don't know how much it will cost. They may die of illness on the way. 2 denarii is already the highest price. We still look at General Livius for the sake of it." A merchant said, "If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 257 Confusion. "Can't it be higher?" Aetius said. "Higher? I can just go to Asia and buy them. Slaves in Asia are much cheaper than in Rome. 4 drachmas can buy 1 slave." The merchant said dissatisfiedly. "Okay, just 2 dinars," Aetius said helplessly. "There are less than 1,000 people in this village, and the money from selling slaves is pitiful. Fortunately, there are cattle and sheep to supplement." "Sir, I want to talk to you about something," Spartacus said. "What is it?" Aetius asked. "Can we not sell them as slaves?" Spartacus asked. "No, this is the end of going against Rome. They must pay the price for their actions." Aetius shook his head. "But if you can take out 2,000 drachmas, I can sell them to you." "Wait a minute, I want all these people," Spartacus said quickly, and then went to find those fellow villagers. "They have a lot of money in their hands, so he can borrow some from them." "You don't mind having one more competitor, do you?" Aetius said to the merchants. "Whatever," the merchants said. This time, Levi offended many merchants because they had few competitors. Moreover, Levi had dealt with more than 100,000 prisoners of war a while ago, which had consumed a lot of their funds. They didn't care about such a few slaves. Not long after, Spartacus and a few people came over with money bags. "This is more than 1,200 drachmas. We will give up the income from this operation." Spartacus said, "This is against the rules. I need cash. I need to distribute it to the soldiers." Aetius shook his head and said, "Plus the salary of all the soldiers in our village this month." Spartacus gritted his teeth and said. Aetius thought about it and nodded. Their village dispatched more than 200 soldiers, and the total amount was far more than 2,000 dinars. "Well, then, but I advise you not to do this. We will sweep all the Thracian tribes here that support the Pontic people. You can't save them all." Aetius took the money bag and said. Hearing this, it was like a thunderclap exploding in Spartacus' mind. and he was completely stunned. "How many people are there in those tribes?" Spartacus asked in a trembling voice. "There must be tens of thousands of people." Aetius thought for a while and said. Spartacus was completely stunned when he thought that tens of thousands of Thracians would be sold as slaves by the Romans. "We can't hurt innocent people. They are just women and children who didn't participate in the war," Spartacus said angrily. "Their families have joined the Pontic army. No one can hurt Rome without paying a price," Aetius said in a stern tone. "Even so, there is no need to sell them all as captives. Don't lie to me. I know that some people rebelled against Rome, but Rome finally forgave them," Spartacus said. He was not a fool. There were many people who rebelled against Rome these days, but not everyone who rebelled against Rome was sold as a slave. Some people became friends of the Romans instead. Aetius' face flushed with rebuttal, but the merchants sneered. One of them said, "Aetius, it seems that you have no status in the eyes of this barbarian. He dared to openly contradict you." Barbarian? They dared to call themselves barbarians? Although Spartacus heard many people secretly call Thracians that, it was the first time he was so angry. Looking at Spartacus's eyes flashing with fierceness, the merchants couldn't help but get scared. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" At this time, a voice came from the side. Spartacus looked over and found that it was a military tribune who was commanding this operation. "Nothing, just a small matter. It will be dealt with immediately," Aetius said with a smile, and then pulled Spartacus to the side. "Spartacus, who do you think you are to talk to me like this? I tell you honestly, don't bring your tribe's temper here. This is the Roman army. Not to mention your tribe, even your entire Thracian people are nothing in front of Rome. Have you seen the fate of the king of Pontus? He had an army of 300,000, but now he is being chased by us and is fleeing in a panic. Are you Thracians stronger than Pontus? If you continue like before, you will bring disaster to yourself and your tribe," Aetius said angrily. Spartacus just didn't give him face, which made him very angry. Spartacus felt extremely angry, but he finally endured it. He knew who was good to him. "I'm sorry," Spartacus said. "It doesn't matter. Don't do this again next time. Not everyone is as good-tempered as me." Aetius patted his shoulder gently and said that after getting along for so long, he understood that Spartacus was actually a good person except for being a little arrogant. Spartacus nodded, and then left with a dull look. Seeing him like this, the Thracians were a little worried, so they left a few people to accompany him. After an unknown amount of time, some Thracians came to him. "Thank you for saving us." "May God bless you, kind Thracians," a Thracian with tattoos on his body said. Spartacus glanced at them, and dozens of Thracians appeared in front of them. They had old people and children, looking at him with extremely grateful eyes. "You should leave quickly, don't let them catch you again," Spartacus said. We have no food, all our clothes have been taken away by them, and the houses have been burned. If we leave now, we will starve to death and freeze to death," the Thracian said, and then they all looked at Spartacus with pleading eyes. Spartacus looked around. After the looting was completed, the Roman soldiers set all the houses on fire, and the whole village was engulfed in flames. This made him very angry, and he had a heartfelt disgust for the Roman army. "These damn Romans are pushing people to a dead end. I'm sorry, I can't do anything," Spartacus shook his head and said, and then he left here without looking back. "There are more than 1,000 of them, and he can't support them anyway." Seeing Spartacus leaving, the Thracians fell into despair. "Winter is here, there are no houses, no warm clothes, no money and food. What else can they do except die?" In the following March, Spartacus became confused. What are they fighting for? Why do they help the Romans oppress the Thracians? He was completely confused. Chapter 258 Fight. In the military camp, Spartacus walked around blankly with dark circles under his eyes. "Sir, I saw that fool. I heard that he spent 2,000 dinars to save 1,000 Thracian slaves. But those Thracians had to sell themselves into slavery because they had no food or drink." In the Roman military camp, a soldier pointed at Spartacus and said with a smile, "Barbarians are like this, they are not smart." A military tribune said contemptuously. He had a long scar on his face and looked extremely fierce. He was an who had returned from Rome. Hearing this, Spartacus was shocked and angry. Those Thracians actually sold themselves into slavery because they had no food or drink? And they dared to call themselves barbarians. Asshole, who are you calling a barbarian? Spartacus walked up and said angrily. Soon he discovered Cinna's identity, and he was actually a military tribune. This made him lose his momentum. At this time, a soldier thought this was an opportunity to flatter him and hurriedly went up to him. What do you think? Do you know how to talk to your superiors, you Thracian barbarian? The soldier's disdainful tone finally made him lose his composure, and the anger that had been pent up for a long time burst out. You damn bastards, I will beat you to death today. After saying that, Spartacus hit the soldier in the face, and a mouthful of teeth mixed with blood flew out. Then he punched him hard, and after a few punches, the soldier fainted. Fuck you, stop it, Cynas said, and then kicked Spartacus. Spartacus had been wary of this culprit. After dodging the kick, he rushed directly to Cynas, and then punched him in the lower abdomen, directly beating Cynas to bend over. Cynas was shocked, and the other soldiers were also dumbfounded. He actually dared to attack Cynas. Who is Cynas? He was a senior military tribune and a close confidant of Levi. Even Belius was quite polite to him because he knew that Cynas would be a senator of the Roman Senate sooner or later. Cynas was furious. He had never been insulted like this before. Even Levi had not treated him like this. He was actually knocked to the ground and punched and kicked by a barbarian. He tried to dodge and stand up, but Spartacus was not only tall, but also very powerful. In a real one-on-one fight, he was really no match for him. Just as he was about to get up, he was kicked to the ground again. A flurry of punches and kicks landed on him, and Cynas was beaten so hard that he couldn't get up. Under Spartacus's punches and kicks, Cynas had an urge to kill. He swore to the true god. He swore to the Olympic gods. He must kill this damn barbarian. A Roman soldier next to him was also shocked. The cruelty of this Thracian was beyond imagination. If he rushed forward, he would probably be beaten up, so he rolled his eyes and shouted loudly, "The Thracians are beating the Romans! The Thracians are beating the Romans!" The fight here had already attracted some Roman soldiers who were eager to watch the fun. After hearing his instigation, some hot-blooded Roman soldiers immediately rushed towards Spartacus. Seeing this, how could some Thracian soldiers bear it? So they immediately rushed forward to help Spartacus. So a big melee started immediately. Asshole, tell me what's going on? Why did a large-scale group fight happen in the barracks? Beja slammed the table hard and said to several dejected officers in front of him, he was just out for a while. Why did the barracks become a mess when he just came back? Cynas lowered his head, with gauze tied on his face, lowered his head, and looked bruised and swollen, but his face was ashen, and the whole person exuded an aura of keeping strangers away. Aetius felt a tingling scalp, and he glanced at Caesar. Caesar looked helpless. Since he asked for demotion, he has become Aetius's immediate superior, but he didn't expect this to happen. Report to the commander, because Cynas called the Thracian chief a barbarian. This conflict was triggered. I think both sides are responsible. They were a little impulsive, Caesar said. Spartacus was a soldier under his command, and he had to find a way to protect him. He also pointed out Spartacus's identity as a chieftain, hoping that Belius could handle the matter as fairly as possible. Call him a barbarian? So that's what it was like, Belius thought. In the eyes of the Romans, except for the Greeks, almost all other nations can be called barbarians, and the Thracians are no exception. It's just that Levi stipulated that it was strictly forbidden to call other allies like this in the army, because it would cause great trouble. He felt the helplessness of the United States and later generations. Both sides are responsible. Beating the commander in the army must be dealt with severely, a military tribune said angrily. Captain Cynas was also wrong. He shouldn't have called him a barbarian to his face, Aetius said forcefully, but seeing Cynas' murderous eyes, he quickly swallowed the next words. If the commander hits him, he has to bear it. He must not hit the commander under any circumstances. That's right, he is justified in hitting the commander. Almost everyone sided with Cynas. They were all officers, and many of them were Levi's retainers. Of course, they sided with Cynas and would never tolerate such a thing as beating the commander in the army. Okay, Don't argue. I have decided on this matter. Spartacus and the 2 Roman soldiers will be confined for 15 days. Cernas was also wrong and will be confined for 1 day. The other soldiers involved will be confined for 3 days. This matter is settled. No one is allowed to argue again. Belus said. Yes, Commander, everyone said. Although Cernas agreed on the surface, his face was cold and anyone could see that he was in a bad mood. Thank you so much. After going out, Aetius said to Caesar, he knew that Belus could let him go. In the final analysis, it was for Caesar's sake. After all, he had been an adjutant of Livy, and his uncle was a Roman consul, a standard second-generation official. It doesn't matter, this is what I should do, but you have to train them well and don't let them fight every day. Caesar said dissatisfiedly, these Thracians are really outrageous. Not only are they unruly, but they often disobey the orders of their superiors, and this time they even beat up their superiors. Don't worry, I will teach them a lesson, Aetius said. In the dark confinement room, no sound can be heard. Spartacus has been locked up here for 15 days. He finally understands why some people are so afraid of the confinement room. This kind of loneliness away from the whole world is not something that ordinary people can endure. But he felt a flame of anger in his heart, and this fire burned more and more. Chapter 259 Deserter. He was disappointed with the Roman army, and even hated it. This was an army made up of demons. He had saved so many Thracians with great effort, but he didn't expect them to become slaves. So he made a decision that he would leave the Roman army. The door of the confinement room opened, and the dazzling sunlight appeared in front of him, which made him cover his eyes. When he adapted, he found Aetius standing in front of him. The confinement is over, come with me, Aetius said. Spartacus slowly stood up and left with him. Have you reflected on it these days? Aetius said. Spartacus nodded expressionlessly. Of course it was just perfunctory. Aetius sighed. Don't be so impulsive in the future. If you encounter that kind of thing again, you can come to me. Thank you, sir, you are a good man. Spartacus said. Really, if you want to repay me, then train well, go take a shower and rest, and start training tomorrow. Aetius patted his shoulder. I'm sorry, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you. Spartacus thought. What did you say? Someone is missing? Who is it? Belus said angrily. Spartacus, the young chieftain who fought some time ago, Aetius said, and cursed Spartacus countless times in his heart. You, this guy, have caused me so much trouble. I have offended many people for you, but you just ran away without saying a word. How can I live my life in the future? How long has it been? 3 days. It's been 3 days. What have you been doing during this time? Why don't you come to report? Belus said angrily. Aetius' face was flushed. He thought Spartacus was confused and went somewhere to relax, but he didn't expect that he disappeared for 3 days. This is not called missing. This is being a deserter. Do you understand? What I despise most in my life is deserters. How can you be a cavalry captain? You are such a waste. Listening to Belus's scolding, Aetius could only endure it. When Belias had almost vented his anger, Aetius said, Sir, please allow me to bring people to capture him. No, your men are all Thracians, so I can't send you. I'll choose someone else. Belias said. There is one more thing. His father is the chief of the tribe. I'm worried that they will protect him. Aetius said. Is that so? Then tell his father to hand over Spartacus, otherwise their tribe will be the enemy of Rome, and their entire tribe will pay the price. Belias said disdainfully. A small branch tribe of Thrace was not taken seriously in his eyes. Well then, Aetius sighed and said, not knowing who Belias would send to capture Spartacus. It was snowing heavily in the deep mountains of Thrace, covering the mountain village with a layer of silver makeup. Sarah left home a little uneasy. Faye went to the Medoi tribe a few days ago and got angry when he came back. From then on, Faye's face was no longer smiling, but she had a gloomy face every day. She asked what happened, but Faye didn't say anything, and sometimes she was even so angry that she cursed at people, which made many people headache. At this moment, a somewhat cold palm suddenly covered her lips. Sarah was shocked, and when she was about to fight back, she felt that familiar breath. She looked back and found that it was Spartacus. Spartacus, why are you back? Sarah said in shock. Wasn't he in the army in front? Spartacus in front of him looked extremely embarrassed. with messy hair and a mouth full of stubble, as if he hadn't taken a shower for more than 10 days, and looked like a tramp. The Romans are too cruel. They captured many Thracians and said I was a barbarian, so I came back. Spartacus stammered. Do you know what you are doing? Do you know how the Romans deal with deserters? Sarah said in shock. This was simply too incredible. Spartacus actually became a deserter. This simply overturned her 3 views. I know, but I really don't want to fight for the Romans. You don't understand what they did. They burned, killed, looted, and did all kinds of evil. They are a group of demons, Spartacus said, covering his head. He still has nightmares sometimes. You will bring disaster to the tribe, Sarah said with a serious face. Spartacus hesitated. Come with me to see my father, Sarah said. Okay, Spartacus said. Soon he returned to his familiar home and saw his old father. Faye seemed surprised and asked him why he came back, but Sarah saw the pain and disappointment in his eyes. Spartacus told Faye what happened, and the disappointment in Faye's eyes became more obvious, which made Spartacus feel more uneasy. You are the first warrior in the neighborhood, and I have always been proud of you. I thought you would make our tribe more prosperous, but I found out that I was wrong, Faye said sadly, and even a trace of tears appeared in her eyes. Spartacus looked at his father in a daze. He had been his father's pride since he was a child, and he was a warrior praised by everyone. This was the first time his father looked at him with such disappointment. Do you know, a few days ago, the Medoi tribe sent someone to inform me to hand you over to the Romans, otherwise, our village will become the enemy of Rome, and our entire tribe will become slaves. Faye said. What did you say? How could they do this? Spartacus said angrily. They can do this because they are Romans. No one can match them in the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. Faye said. Father, you won't hand over Spartacus, right? Sarah said in panic. Spartacus, do you want the entire tribe to be implicated and become slaves because of you? Or do you want to surrender yourself, which will save the tribe from disaster? Faye said. Spartacus was shocked. How could this be? How could they be so unreasonable? This was his own business. How could they implicate the entire tribe? They are really too much. Spartacus said angrily. I believe you will make a wise choice. Faye sighed and said. Spartacus returned to his home in despair. Why did he become like this? How could the Romans be so overbearing? Sarah kept comforting him, but Spartacus could not hear a word. He felt dizzy and had not slept well these days because he had been sleeping outdoors, so he fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 260 Arrest. Faye cooked and brought it in. After finding that he was sleeping, she did not disturb him, but waited quietly for him to wake up. It was unknown how long it took before Spartacus woke up. He looked around, and it was quiet. Sarah was lying on him quietly. After sensing his movement, Sarah also woke up. What time is it now? Spartacus asked in a deep voice. I don't know. Sarah was also a little confused. He opened the door and saw that there were 4 soldiers from the village standing outside the door. They looked at Sarah and then continued to look forward. Sarah's face turned pale. What did they mean? She went back to the house and said, It's evening now. You probably haven't had a good meal for a few days. Do you want me to heat up the meal again? No. I haven't eaten as well as this these days. Spartacus laughed and said, then picked up a piece of bread and started eating. Father arranged people outside. Sarah whispered, Are you afraid that I will run away? Spartacus laughed at himself. He didn't expect his father to treat him like this. This is simply the greatest sorrow. At this moment, there was a sudden noise outside, and then several familiar people walked in. It's you. Seeing them, Spartacus said angrily. Spartacus, you never thought of it, Saenas said with a big laugh. Right next to him were several fully armed Roman soldiers, one of whom was looking at him with his mouth open. You know, I took this mission for you, and I was scolded by the deputy general for this, but I think it's worth it. Saenas said, Now follow me obediently. Sir, can you let him go? We can give you money. A lot of money, Sarah said in panic. She heard that the Roman army dealt with deserters very severely, and even sentenced them to death in serious cases. Only then did Saenas notice Sarah. Seeing Sarah's amazing beauty and noble temperament, he was stunned for a moment. Although he had seen many beautiful women, he had never been so moved by a woman. Saenas admitted that he liked him. Soon he came back to his senses and looked at Sarah deeply. You harbored the deserter Spartacus and will be sentenced to slavery. Sarah's face turned pale. What did she mean? You bastard! What did you say? Spartacus was completely furious and rushed directly to Sinas. If you hit me, your whole village will die. Sinas looked at him coldly and said. Hearing this, Spartacus abruptly retracted his fist. He knew that Sinas was not lying. He saw with his own eyes how cruel the Romans were. Bang! Sinas kicked Spartacus to the ground and then punched and kicked him. Did you feel good when you beat me? Now I want you to know the consequences of offending me. How does it feel to be beaten in public? The Roman soldiers also punched and kicked him. At this time, the Thracians outside the door also walked in. They were extremely angry when they saw this scene. If it weren't for Faye's repeated instructions, they would have rushed up long ago. Sir, please don't do this. Let him go. At this time, Sarah hugged Sinas and was about to kick Spartacus's leg. Looking at Sarah's beautiful face, Sinas was a little absent-minded for a moment, but he soon came back to his senses. He grabbed Sarah's hand and said, slaves are not qualified to make requests. Sarah felt a fear. Sinas concealed it well, but she still felt the desire hidden deep inside. Cough. Cough. At this time, there was a light cough outside the door, and then Faye walked in. Sir, Spartacus has been caught. Faye glanced at Spartacus and said, seeing Spartacus' face covered with blood, there was a trace of pain in his eyes, but the pain quickly flashed away. Yes, thank you for your cooperation, but I found that there is a little problem here. Someone here is protecting Spartacus. Sinas looked at the Thracians who were gathering around and said seriously, I told Sarah to stabilize Spartacus. She is definitely not shielding Spartacus. Faye said, no, you are Spartacus' father. Your words cannot be used as evidence. Sinas said, she is a priest serving the gods. This has nothing to do with shielding or not. Faye felt annoyed. This Roman was simply shameless. He looked like he was determined to take Sarah away. How are you going to deal with her? Degrade her to a slave? Sinas said with a smile. No, you can't do this. If you dare to take Sarah away, we will fight you. The Thracians around said angrily. Sarah was a goddess in the hearts of countless Thracians, and she was a priest serving the gods. In their hearts, she was like a saint. Sinas actually wanted to reduce her to a slave. This was simply too abominable. Is this your choice? Sinas said coldly, looking at Faye. Faye felt embarrassed. The Romans were really too much. Agree to his request. The gods have given me a revelation. I didn't understand what it meant at first, but now I understand. Sarah calmed down. Everyone looked at her in a daze. What did she mean? If you really want to take Spartacus and me away, I swear you will regret it. The gods will punish you. Sarah said. Really? I don't believe in your false gods. I only believe in the great true God. Sinas said. Hearing this, everyone was furious. This damn bastard dared to blaspheme the gods. Don't persuade me anymore. Let Spartacus and I follow him. All this is the will of the gods. Sarah said. This made everyone embarrassed, but they didn't dare to disobey the will of the gods. Okay, respected commander, you have a long journey. Do you want to rest at my house first? Faye said. No, I have something else to do and I have to go back immediately. Sinas said. I have a small gift for you and the other officers. I hope you can take care of Spartacus and Sarah. Faye said. Sinas rolled his eyes and laughed. Ha ha ha. I didn't realize you are so sensible. Let's put it this way. His crime is serious and not serious. I will spare his death and demote him to a slave. Thank you very much, sir, Faye said with gratitude. After receiving the gift from Faye, Sinas left with the gray-faced Spartacus and Sarah. Chapter 261 Gift. In a mansion in Massaka, Levi was listening to Archelaus' report. General, Mithridates is now recruiting troops. If we march into Pontus now, we will surely be able to win. When winter is over, we will probably face Mithridates' army, and then it will be another big battle, Archelaus said. Although he had left Pontus, he still kept in touch with many nobles in Pontus. In addition, after Pontus was defeated, many nobles in Pontus took the initiative to provide various information to him after knowing that he had surrendered to Levi. Levi couldn't help but frown. He finally understood why Lucullus insisted on fighting in winter in history. This opportunity should not be missed. I know. I will order the army to prepare and march today. Levi thought for a while and said, that's great, I have some friends in Pontus. They all admire Rome very much and hope to surrender to the general," Archelaus said happily. "Really? That's great. Tell me who they are." Levi was also very happy. It was good to have a guide. There were so many fewer troubles. So Archelaus introduced him, and the two sides discussed some details, and did not let him leave until dinner. At this time, Lysis appeared at the right time and put several documents on Livius's desk. "General, this is a document that needs your signature. In addition, His Majesty Diotarus invites you and your wife to attend the banquet. Tell him I am not free. Tell his army to prepare. The army will go to Pontus immediately." Livius picked up a document, looked at it, signed it, and then took off his ring and stamped it. "Should our army also go to the war?" "Yes." "Okay." Spartacus. When Livius saw the next document, he was shocked. "What's wrong?" Lysis said. He took a look at the document and found that it was a list of deserters sent from below. "Nothing, just thought of something," Livius said. He didn't expect to meet Spartacus now, and he really became a deserter as in history. How should he deal with Spartacus? Now his influence is getting bigger and bigger. For example, the pirate rebellion during the Lepidus rebellion was not that serious. If Spartacus was allowed to go to Rome as history had shown, would it be different? Investigate this man's affairs, and use my money to buy these people and give them to Quintus Basiatus, so that he can train them into gladiators. Levi drew a line under Spartacus' name and said, "Yes, General." Although Lysis didn't understand why Levi was interested in a Thracian, it didn't affect his obedience to Levi's orders. Levi seemed to see his doubts, so he said, "The true God told me that this is a very extraordinary person." So that's why Levi made predictions in front of Lysis and others in order to fool them, which made Lysis and others more pious to the true God. So Lysis decided to pay a little attention to this person in the future. Winter has passed and spring has come. In the mansion of Quintus in Capua, after hearing what a visitor said, Quintus couldn't believe his ears. "What did you say?" "Levi sent someone to send me a gift." Quintus was surprised and happy. Since Levi became famous, he has been extremely dazzling. Recently, he defeated the 300,000 strong army of Pontus. Quintus boasted to everyone that he was Levi's friend, but he didn't expect that Levi would prepare gifts for him when he was busy with military affairs. "Yes, General, Levi has already invaded Pontus, so I can only entrust you to bring these gifts to you. In addition, he also wrote a letter to you," a slave trader said respectfully, and then took out the letter. The fact that Levi took the trouble to prepare gifts proved that the friendship between the two sides was very deep. "Ha ha ha, he is like this, very good to friends, and has helped me a lot. By the way, I wonder what the gift is?" Quintus took the letter with a big laugh. 13 slaves. "The general hopes that you will train them into gladiators and let them appear in the arena," the slave trader said. Quintus nodded. "Is that the case?" "Bring them up. I think I will definitely like this gift," Quintus said. "As you wish." Soon the slave trader brought 13 slaves up, and at this time Lydia also rushed over after hearing the news, and was very happy to know the news. Although Quintus's mansion was quite luxurious, Spartacus was not interested in all this. There was only Sarah in his mind, and it was Sarah's desperate protection that saved him a lot of suffering. If it weren't for her and her father's bribery, he might have been killed by sinners on the way. This made him feel extremely guilty about Sarah, and he vowed to save Sarah from the sea of suffering. When Quintus saw the slaves, Quintus' smile froze slightly. There were tall and short slaves among these slaves. Although the overall quality looked good, except for 3 people, the others were by no means excellent gladiators. "What did they do before?" Quintus asked. "Deserter," the slave trader said. "Deserter? Does General Levi want them to die in the arena?" Quintus asked. "I don't know about that. Maybe there is a reason in the letter." The slave trader shook his head. Quintus frowned. He thought for a long time but still couldn't understand what Levi meant. Levi was also a gladiator trainer. He didn't believe that Levi didn't understand these things, but he still thanked the slave trader and sent him away personally. After the slave trader left, Lydia smiled and said, "That's great. I didn't expect Levi to still think about your friendship." "Of course, he called me big brother when he was a child," Quintus boasted. Lydia smiled and pursed her red lips. not intending to expose his boast. "Open the letter and see what's written in the letter," Lydia said. "Okay." Quintus opened the envelope and decided to share everything with Lydia. The first part was mainly some meaningless greetings, but these greetings were like heavenly sounds in Quintus' eyes, making him laugh. Later, Levi mentioned the identities of these people, hoping that they could die in the arena and not resell them. As expected, he wanted to punish them. Quintus thought he had guessed Levi's purpose. "Levi gave us a gift. Do you think we should invite his family to visit?" Quintus said eagerly. The relationship between the two families has become increasingly cold recently, which makes Quintus very worried. He has been looking for ways to deepen the relationship between the two families. He thinks this is the best opportunity. "I think this is a good idea," Lydia immediately agreed. Chapter 262 Amidst. "I think this is a good idea," Lydia agreed immediately. "Then it's settled. I'll invite Julia and the others to come as guests," Quintus said. Spartacus and his companions, led by a white-haired Syrian slave with clumsy arms, walked into the dark and gloomy dungeon. Along the way, all kinds of strong men were locked up in the dungeon. Some of them were only wearing a pair of shorts, while others were wearing nothing at all, with their big dicks hanging out. "Hey, come and see the newcomers. Boy, if you don't want to die, come and taste my big dick. Maybe I can take care of you in the arena in the future. Ha ha ha. Don't scare these guys. How can I play with them in the future?" The gladiators shouted at Spartacus and his companions. Some of these deserters were very angry, while others looked terrified. The Syrian slave smiled and said, "If you can, please try to be patient, because you are no match for them." "Do they all bully the newcomers like this?" someone asked. "Yes, newcomers have no status here. You will slowly learn." The Syrian slave smiled and said, "May I ask what your name is?" "You can call me Lamer. If you encounter any difficulties in the future, you can come to me, but I can't guarantee that I can solve them," the Syrian slave said. "Thank you, you're welcome." Soon Lamer took them to a cell, and Spartacus and others were locked up. Spartacus found a place to lie down, and then fell into memories again. "Hold on, believe me, Spartacus, you will become a real hero. This is all the revelation of the gods." Even before they separated, Sarah kept saying to him, "Thinking of this." Spartacus smiled bitterly. "Now he is like this, how can he become a hero?" "Hey, who are you? Where are you from?" At this time, a person in a cell next to him asked in Greek. Spartacus looked to the side and found a red-haired Gaul. He had brown eyes and a cynical smile on his face. He looked like a very easygoing person. The deserters looked at each other and did not answer. Finally, a young man with fair skin, short black hair and a very strong body said, "My name is Curious. I used to be a Roman, but I became a slave for some reason." "What's your name?" "My name is Cruz, a Gaul." "I'm glad to meet you." The Gaul shook his hand and said. So the two of them started chatting. Through chatting, he learned that Cruz had not been a gladiator for a long time, but he had participated in several battles and performed very well. If nothing unexpected happened, he would sooner or later become a member of the Batrayals family. "There are only two people in the entire Batrayals family who can be compared with me," Cruz said very confidently. "Which two people?" Curious asked curiously. "One is called Castus. He was the champion of Capua last year," Cruz said. At this time, a red-haired young man walked past the prison cell with two scantily clad slave girls in his arms. He was holding a wine jug in one hand and pouring wine into his mouth from time to time. "He is Castus." Christ pointed at the young man and said, "He is romantic, loves wine, and has an irregular lifestyle, but I have to admit that he is a talented gladiator. At least I am not sure I can beat him now." "Why is he outside?" Curious asked in surprise. "Because he is the champion. Quintus gave him all kinds of privileges. As long as you are the champion, you can do the same," Christ said. Curious shook his head and decided to forget it. He knew that he had some skills, and it would be good as long as he could survive in the arena. "If you become the champion, can you buy me a slave girl?" At this time, Spartacus suddenly asked. "Of course there is no problem, as long as the money you earn far exceeds the price of the slave girl," Christ said. "This is really great." Spartacus felt that there seemed to be a ray of light in his gloomy life. Maybe he could ask Quintus to buy Sarah back, so that he could be with Sarah. "What about the other person?" Curious asked. "You know Mamus, a gladiator who was born as an underground gladiator and is very experienced. He has a cruel personality. Don't mess with him unless it is necessary," Cruz whispered, and it seemed that he was also very afraid of Mamus. "I know," Curious said quickly. Outside the city of Amidst, the Roman army was attacking the city. A large number of ladders, towers and siege vehicles were continuously transported to the city, and the Galatian soldiers and Thracians used them to climb up the city walls. But Amidst's resistance was very fierce. They pushed the ladders away with iron forks and sprinkled kerosene on the towers and siege vehicles. Those towers and siege vehicles were on fire, and one Thracian and Galatian soldiers screamed and fell from the ladders. Levi couldn't help but frown when he saw this. Since he led the army to attack Pontus, he had been unstoppable all the way to the city of Amidst. Many of the Pontic cities along the way surrendered to Levi under the persuasion of Archelaus. There were also several cities that were unwilling to surrender, but they were easily conquered by Levi, and then the entire city was robbed by the Roman army, which was considered a small amount of money. Mithridates had no choice but to abandon the city and escape again. Levi ordered the Gallic soldiers and Thracians to attack the city of Amidst several times, but all failed. It seemed impossible to capture it in a short time. "Lucullus, if you were in charge, how many people and how much time would you need to capture this city?" Levi asked. "If you give me 2 Roman legions and 5,000 Galatian soldiers, I will definitely be able to capture Amidst within 2 months. Lucullus thought for a while and said that since the counterweight trebuchet, siege has become much easier. Livius nodded. "Then I will give you 2 Roman legions and 5,000 Galatian soldiers to capture the city as soon as possible." "Do you want to divide the troops?" Lucullus asked. "Yes, I must go after Mithridates. That guy is too good at running. I must catch him as soon as possible." Livius said. "Mithridates is simply an eel, slippery, and it is very difficult to catch him. I am afraid that he will escape to Armenia. The king of Armenia is his son-in-law." Lucullus said. "Not only Armenia, but also Pontus, Armenia and Parthia have formed an alliance and will help each other when necessary. This is what he is a little worried about." Parthia is also known as the Parthian Empire, ancient Persia, in China, which is extremely powerful. Chapter 263 King of Kings. The Parthian archery method is the Mangadi archery method of the Mongols, which shows how powerful the Parthians are. The Armenians are also proficient in horse archery, and they can do everything that the Parthians can do. Armenia at this time was by no means as weak as Armenia in later generations. Its territory extended from the Caucasus to the border of Palestine, including parts of Russia and Turkey. The entire territory of Iraq and Syria were his territories, and the Armenian king Tigranes was known as the King of Kings. The reason why Armenia has such a vast territory is basically because he fought for it. He destroyed countless small countries, followed by 4 king guards, and his reputation spread throughout the East. To deal with these 2 countries, it is still necessary to be very cautious if you want to win them without cheating, so Levi wanted to end the war with Mithridates as soon as possible. At this time, Archelaus ran over on a war horse. "Report to the general, I got the news that Mithridates has fled from Telora and went to Armenia for refuge." Hearing this, everyone's face changed slightly, and what they feared came true. Livius sighed. "Is Armenia really going to be involved? What should we do?" Lucullus said. "First, use courtesy and then force. We send envoys to negotiate with Armenia and ask them to hand over Mithridates. Use this time to occupy the entire territory of Pontus as soon as possible," Livius said. Lucullus nodded. It seemed that this was the only way. "Who should we send as an envoy?" Lucullus asked. "What do you think of Caesar?" Livius asked. "Well, is he too young?" Lucullus said. "Being an envoy is a big deal. How can we let Caesar, a young boy, take on the task? He is not young anymore. He is the same age as me, and he has experience in being an envoy." Livius said. Some scenes that are not suitable for children suddenly appeared in his mind. "Well then," Lucullus said. Since Livius insisted, he didn't care. In Livius's caravan, a handsome middle-aged man was talking to a Roman officer with a smile. "Dear Terence, recently one of my followers made a small fortune following your army, which made him very grateful. He entrusted me to express his gratitude and sent a small gift to show his respect. After saying that, a slave standing beside him immediately presented a small box. The Roman officer was not polite and took it directly and opened it. The golden light almost dazzled his eyes. This made his face almost smile like a flower. These fallen monarchs were really rich. He was just a centurion of Livius's personal guard, and he just won over the military tribunes, adjutants, and lieutenants. They didn't know how to bribe them. Seeing the officer's satisfied look, the smile on the face of the middle-aged man became even more prosperous. But in his heart, he was far from being as happy as he appeared. He thought that Antiochus, as the king of Syria, had to curry favor with the officers around Livius because his country was destroyed by Armenia. This made him feel a little embarrassed. When Syria was at its most prosperous, it was a powerful empire that stretched from Afghanistan in the east to Palestine in the west, enough to compete with Rome. But everything at that time was like a mirage with the destruction of the country. However, Diotharius' restoration of the country gave him hope. Rome gave Livy extremely powerful power, and he could decide all matters related to the war. As long as Livy was willing to attack Armenia, it was entirely possible for Syria to restore its country. Therefore, he tried to win over Livy and all those around him who could speak to him at all costs. Since King Antiochus is so sincere, I will tell you a very valuable news. Terence put the box of gold away without hesitation. He believed that the news he gave was definitely worth the price, or even much higher. "Oh, what news?" Antiochus asked. "Mithridates has fled Pontus and went to Armenia." The general decided to send someone to Armenia, hoping that King Tigranes of Armenia could hand Mithridates over to Rome. Terence said, "Are you telling the truth?" Antiochus said with a look of surprise. "Of course it's true. I heard the general and Lieutenant Lucullus say so with my own ears," Terence said, shaking the box in his hand. This little money alone was not enough. At this time, Antiochus' heart was already filled with surprise. If Tigranes refused to return Mithridates, then Livius would have an 80% chance of attacking Armenia. According to his understanding of Tigranes, he was a very arrogant person. How could he hand over his father-in-law to the Romans? So he had a chance to restore his country. At this time, in his eyes, the greedy Terence was so cute. He winked at a follower behind him, and the follower immediately handed a purse to Terence. "Please rest assured, I will prepare another generous gift after I go back," Antiochus said with a smile. Terence opened the purse and found a large amount of gold coins inside. His face immediately smiled like a chrysanthemum. "Okay, I will tell you if there is any good news later," Terence said. After bidding farewell to Terence, Antiochus immediately prepared a heavy gift and came to the camp to ask to see Livius. At this time, Livius was meeting Caesar. "What did you say?" "Let me go to Armenia as an envoy." After hearing what Livius said, Caesar looked unwilling. Now the country is in chaos and even Bendu has not been completely pacified. It is very dangerous to go on a diplomatic mission. "Why, you don't want to?" "I heard that you seemed to have been on a diplomatic mission to Bithynia and met King Nicomedes," Levi asked. He was also very curious about whether Caesar was gay with Nicomedes. Caesar's face immediately darkened. How could Levi know such a thing? This was definitely a black history and must not be mentioned. But Levi was his superior, and he had no way to deal with Levi. Ahem. Caesar coughed twice. "It's better not to mention that kind of thing. If you really let me go on a diplomatic mission, I will obey your orders." "Your mission this time is very important. Not only do you have to explore the terrain along the way, but it would be best if you can find some people who are dissatisfied with the king of Armenia. I estimate that Tigranes will not agree to our request." "Then we will need them," Levi said. "Are we going to use troops against Armenia?" Caesar asked. "Yes." "Should we be more cautious?" "That's Tigranes, the king of kings," Caesar said, even though he had heard of the king of kings' reputation. "I know, but this battle is inevitable," Livy said. "The king of kings sounds very intimidating because he destroyed many countries. But Lucullus could defeat him, Pompey could defeat him, and he was confident that he could defeat him too." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel. Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 264 Antioch. Okay, I understand, Caesar said helplessly. I will send 600 cavalrymen to protect you. Be careful on the road, Levi said. As you command, General, Caesar said. Not long after he left, a soldier came in. Report to the general. The former Syrian king Antiochus wants to see you. Hearing this, Levi's face showed a gloomy look. In the past, Antiochus and many kings of small countries had been begging him to help restore the country, but he did not agree. But now it was time to negotiate with him. Let him in. Not long after, Antiochus, who was radiant, walked in. Great General Levi, I heard that you drove away Mithridates. On behalf of the Syrian royal family, I came here to express my sincere congratulations to you. May the god of war Mars be with you forever. Hearing this, Levi showed disdain. Syria has been destroyed, so where is the Syrian royal family? If you want to restore the country, I'm afraid you are overthinking it. I will not let Syria restore the country, Levi said. Antiochus' face changed drastically. General, what do you mean? Don't you plan to attack Armenia? It's hard to say. If he rejects my proposal, I will probably attack Armenia again, Levi said. Didn't you restore Diotarus to his country? Why can't you restore ours as well? At that time, I needed a strong ally, so I let him restore his country. Now I have enough allies, so there is no need to restore Syria, Levi said. Then what do you plan to do with Syria? Set up a province of Syria. Levi's words were like a sharp knife, piercing Antiochus' heart, and Antiochus' face turned pale. How unfair the gods were. They actually let Syria be destroyed by Armenia first, and then be designated as a province by Rome. But, Levi said. Hearing this, Antiochus immediately came back to his senses, as if he had grabbed a life-saving straw, and hurriedly asked, but what? If you can make meritorious contributions in this battle, I can let you rule Syria in the name of mandate, but you still have to obey the orders of the Syrian governor, and the territory you rule will be greatly reduced, Levi said. The territory of Armenia is really too large. If there's help from these kings of the fallen country, Armenia will easily collapse. Mandatory rule? Antiochus said doubtfully. Yes, Levi said. Some provinces of the Roman Empire in later generations were mandated, such as Palestine, which still had its own rulers, but only needed to pay taxes to Rome and obey the orders of the governor. This is completely unimaginable in the East, where there are often kings in the country. Hearing this, Antiochus was very tempted. Although there is a Syrian governor above him and he has to pay taxes to Rome, it is better to be a Syrian prince than a king of a fallen country. Besides that, there are several conditions, Livius said, such as the need to establish the Holy Church as the state religion and become his protector, etc. The conditions are similar to those of Galatia. After saying this, Livius began to see the guest off. You go back and think about it. Okay, this time I have sent a gift to the general. I hope the general can accept it. Antiochus forced a smile and said, then I will accept it on behalf of the soldiers. Livius said, since someone gave him a gift, he was not polite, just to subsidize the military. In fact, he never accepted bribes because he was very rich, even richer than these kings, and he always remembered the fate of Scipio Africanus. Generals with too much merit would often be hated or even suppressed by the Roman Senate, and they would definitely check his past. Antiochus heard what he meant, sighed and left here, but he hadn't given up yet. The reason why Livius agreed to Diotarus's founding of the country was that he gave him some special gift. Maybe he should ask Diotarus. Inside the gladiator training school of Capua, some gladiators were eating, bragging about how brave they were in today's competition, easily killing the enemy. Some looked sad, because two of them died in the arena. Curious and Spartacus were queuing for food while listening to their chat. After these days of getting along, the two of them have become best friends. I didn't expect two more people to die. The arena is really cruel, Spartacus said with a sigh. Yes, most gladiators will die after winning a few games. Those who can survive are truly strong. Curious said, it's a pity that General Levi doesn't run a gladiator training school. Otherwise it would be great if I could be a gladiator under him." "Why is that?" Spartacus asked. "Because General Levi stipulated that his gladiators could get freedom as long as they could win 10 games. Some are said to have won freedom after only participating in 2 games, which is really enviable," Curius said with a look of longing. "Why did he do this?" Spartacus asked. "Who knows? But he was called the most benevolent slave owner because of this," Curius said. "Unfortunately, his kindness ultimately led to betrayal, so he stopped running the gladiator training school." At this time, Cress interrupted. "Oh, why don't I know what's going on?" Curius said. "This matter has spread like wildfire in Capua. It is said that when Levi defeated the king of Numidia during the expedition to Africa, he led his guards to hunt lions and was hijacked by 2 gladiators under his former command. So Levi has hated gladiators since then." Cress said with a complicated expression. "The gladiators had a very good impression of Levi, and many gladiators were willing to become his subordinates. But unfortunately they were all messed up by those 2 gladiators." "I didn't know there was such a thing," Curius said. "Of course Levi didn't want to admit such a shameful thing. He said he was on a private visit at the time." Cress laughed and said. Spartacus was silent for a while. He had never thought that Levi had such a past. "Well, here is your meal. You have performed very well today. The master said that he would give you more meat and you can also enjoy a small pot of wine." At this time, the slave who served the meal put some rice into Chryses' bowl, added a few slices of meat for him, and brought him a small pot of wine. "Ha ha ha, I can drink wine again." Chryses laughed and drank the wine in big gulps. Looking at the fragrant meat slices and wine, Spartacus and Curius swallowed hard. Since becoming slaves, they have never tasted meat or drunk wine. Chapter 265, Return of Sinners. "You should train hard and become official gladiators as soon as possible." The slave gave them a bowl of barley porridge, and then took 2 slices of black bread to Curius. "We will," Curius said dejectedly. Compared with the food of Cress, theirs was simply garbage. But after training for a whole morning, he was really hungry, so he took a bite of the bread. "Pa, what is this? Why does it smell foul?" After taking a mouthful of bread, Curius quickly spit it out. "Ha ha ha, they really ate it." "Boy, how does my urine smell? Is it delicious? If you want to eat it, I will give you enough." At this time, several gladiators who were eating laughed. "Asshole, I will kill you," Curius said angrily, and then rushed to the gladiator who said he drank his urine. The gladiator fought with Curius without any hesitation. Seeing them fighting, the other gladiators not only did not stop them, but kept making trouble. "Who do you think will win?" "Of course it's Ascalon. How can that new guy be his opponent?" "How about a bet?" "I bet 1 dinar that Ascalon will win." "I bet on him too." The 2 stared at each other. How could they bet? The fact was not beyond their expectations. Compared with Curius, Ascalon's strength and experience were far superior to him. Seeing that Curius suffered a great loss, Spartacus was about to rush forward, but was stopped by Cress. "Look at them. It's useless for you to go up. You will only suffer," Cress said. At this time, Spartacus found that several gladiators were looking at him fiercely. Obviously, if he interfered with the fight, they would not be polite. "Some things must be done even if you know you will fail," Spartacus said with a serious face. After that, he rushed forward and kicked Ascalon. "You dare to ruin our fight. Teach him a lesson. Beat him." Soon several gladiators rushed up and started punching and kicking Spartacus. Chryses shook his head. "You have to do it even if you know you will fail. It's interesting." But soon he also joined the cheering team unscrupulously. "Beat him hard. Don't be polite." "Where are you kicking?" "Stop. Don't kick there." In Quintus' villa, he was meeting a very unexpected guest. "Hello, dear Cinna. I didn't expect you to visit my humble home." "It's really a great honor." "But weren't you fighting in the East? Why did you return to Rome?" Quintus said with a smile on his face. Cinna's face darkened slightly. He couldn't say that he returned to Rome because Levi drove him back. During the investigation, Levi found that Cinna had detained Spartacus' wife, which made him very dissatisfied. Spartacus is a very important figure in the future, and he is disgusted by his private detention of the deserter's wife. It was because of the disgust in Levi's eyes that made Synos very uneasy. He has great ambitions and has always hoped that Levi will support him as the Chief Justice. It would be bad to leave a stain in Levi's heart. The reason I came back is because General Levi asked me to be elected as the civilian tribune of this year, Synos said. He did not lie. This is indeed the reason why Levi asked him to come back. Really? This is really enviable. Congratulations on being valued by Levi, Quintus said with envy and jealousy. Synos also looked complacent. Although the value of the civilian tribune is not as high as before, it is also envied by countless civilians and knights. I heard that the master of the family gave you some deserters as gifts. Yes, I am really unworthy of General Levi's concern for me, which is a testimony to the noble friendship between us. I have always intended to invite Julia and Cybele to visit my home, but unfortunately they have never been free, Quintus said with a look of regret. Synos sneered. As Levi's close ministers, they heard that Levi did not have a particularly good impression of Quintus' family, which was probably the reason why Julia and Cybele refused. I can help persuade them to visit your home, Synos said. That's great, but I have a condition. Please tell me. There is a guy named Spartacus among those deserters. Synos' eyes flashed with a sinister light. Yes, he is the best among those deserters. I think his future achievements will at least be a brave general, and he may even become the champion of Capua. Levi is really a wise man. Quintus began to flatter him desperately. Synos' face became darker and darker. Kill him. What did you say? Quintus stopped talking. As long as you kill him, I will persuade Julia and Cybele to come to your house as guests, Synos said. This. Quintus looked embarrassed. This was a gift from Levi to him. How could he kill him casually, and it was the best gift? He offended you? Quintus asked. That's right, Synos said coldly. I'm sorry, Synos. I can't do this. This is a gift from Levi to me. I must treat him well. Looking at Synos' cannibalistic eyes, Quintus was also dissatisfied. Who does Synos think he is? How dare he look down on him like this? After all, he is Levi's friend, and Synos is just Levi's retainer. But in the end, Quintus was still scared. But I can let him fight the most dangerous battle. I will choose the most powerful enemy for him. Synos stared at him fiercely. Are you really not going to kill him? Believe me, he will die soon, which is no different from killing him, Quintus said. Synos thought about it and finally agreed. Well, take me to see him. No problem. So Quintus took him to the training ground, but found that the gladiators were fighting in a group, which made him extremely annoyed. What are you doing? What are you doing? Quintus roared angrily. The gladiators saw Quintus coming and quickly dispersed. Spartacus, with blood all over his face, raised his head and found Synos with a grim smile on his face. This made him shocked and angry. Why did he appear here? Spartacus, what are you doing? After seeing Spartacus, Quintus became even angrier. He was bearing the pressure of being a future tribune of the people for him, but he didn't expect him to fight here. Spartacus didn't explain, but stared at Synos. Chapter 266, City Fall. Where is my wife? You mean that beautiful woman? I got tired of her, so I threw her to the soldiers to play with, and finally sold her to a brothel. Now I don't know which man she is with. Synos said viciously. You bastard, I'm going to kill you. Spartacus was completely crazy. He rushed up desperately, but was held tightly by bikers. Calm down, brother, don't do this. Hold him quickly, don't let him do stupid things, Quintus said hurriedly. Several gladiators rushed up and restrained Spartacus. Synos looked regretful. He was still hoping that Spartacus would rush up and take the opportunity to kill him. Such an unruly gladiator. I think he should be sent to the underground arena. What do you think? Synos said. Quintus thought for a long time and finally agreed. Okay, I will let him go to the arena in a while, but I hope to see one of the two ladies come to my house as a guest. Synos looked at him coldly. This guy really dared to make a condition. Okay, I will speak well of you in front of the two ladies. After saying that, Synos left here. At this time, Quintus called Spartacus up. What is going on between you and Synos? Quintus asked. So Spartacus told the grudge between the two. So that's it, Quintus said. Do you know what he came here for today? Spartacus shook his head. He asked me to kill you, Quintus said. Spartacus couldn't help but be furious. That damn bastard not only defiled his wife, but also wanted to kill him. But I refused. Spartacus was surprised. Why? In his eyes, Quintus was not a kind slave owner. Because I think you have great potential and you have the hope of becoming a great gladiator. But as a compromise, you will not only have to undergo more rigorous training, but also go to the underground arena to participate in the competition, Quintus said. Underground arena? Yes. There is no honor there, only all kinds of perverted fighting. As long as you can win 20 games, you can leave there and become a real gladiator. Can I make a request? Please say it. I want to know the whereabouts of my wife Sarah. If possible, I hope you can buy her. I sympathize with your experience, but you know that I am not a philanthropist. If you want me to buy her, there is no problem. Become the champion of Capua first. No problem. Please arrange my competition as soon as possible. Master. This is the first time you call me master. I will let you participate in the competition tomorrow. Quintus smiled and patted his shoulder. If he was not the best one among the gifts sent by Levi, he would have let him know what the cruelty of slave owners is. The sun was shining brightly, and huge stones flew into the sky one after another, and then hit the dilapidated walls of Amidst fiercely, smashing the walls into pieces, and some places had already collapsed. The catapults and trebuchets on the walls of Amidst fought back against the trebuchets, and small stones flew down to the trebuchets from a high position, but unfortunately Lucullus built a wall of earth in front of the trebuchets, knocking down most of the attacks. Do you think you can break through Amidst today? Levi asked. The entire city had been pacified by Levi, but only Amidst was still holding on, which made him extremely annoyed. It will definitely work today, just rest assured, Lucullus said confidently. Not long after, a section of the wall was completely destroyed. Lucullus was not in a hurry, and still ordered the soldiers to throw huge stones at the walls of Amidst. Almost all the catapults and trebuchets were destroyed, and Amidst had no power to resist. The soldiers on the wall were desperate. It's over. Amidst was completely finished. After half a day of attack, the catapults finally destroyed the walls one by one, and then Levi's army rushed into Amidst. Facing the fierce Thracians and Galatians, Amidst quickly collapsed. The whole of Bendu was completely pacified. In an official residence in Amidst, Lysis was reporting the results of the battle to Levi. This time we have captured a total of 65,015 prisoners. If we sell them all, we can get about 150,000 dinars. Lysis said. Levi couldn't help but frown. The slaves in this area were too cheap. If they were not transported to Rome, they would not be worth anything at all. But General Lucullus hopes that we can release the Greeks among them. He said that the Greeks are a very civilized race and we should not sell them as slaves. Lysis continued. Levi looked helpless, and he was another Greek fan. In fact, Amidst was originally a colonial city established by the Greeks, so it was not surprising that there were a large number of Greeks. Hundreds of years ago, the Greeks established colonies in various parts of the Mediterranean, including Asia, now in Turkey, the Roman coast, Sicily, and even Marseille in France. Even Naples and Cuma, where Sulla died, were originally colonies established by the Greeks. Tell him that this is not okay. A large number of Greeks have joined the mercenaries and they must pay the price for their actions. I will not allow them to hurt Rome but still be free, Levi said. Thinking of those Greek mercenaries, Levi hated them very much, and he didn't know whether any of them participated in the attack on Dragon City. I understand. In addition, we have seized a large amount of gold and silver treasures in the city. The copper coins and gold and silver alone are about 10 million drachmas, not including those gold and silver jewelry and antique collections. In addition, there are a lot of real estate, Lysis said. Levi nodded with satisfaction. This is the charm of war. Once the enemy rebels against Rome, Rome will take all the enemy's wealth for itself. It is precisely because of this that many Romans are willing to serve for a long time. Well done, Livius said. We can hold a grand auction and invite those merchants to participate in the auction. Those things are useless in our hands, so it's better to sell them to merchants. Got it, General? Lysis wrote it down. There is another thing. Mithridates' son, Macris, the governor of Bosporus, sent a lot of gifts, including a crown worth 1,000 gold coins, saying that he would not avenge his father and he hoped to become a friend of the Romans. Lysis continued, "Sure enough, the emperor's family is the most ruthless. His father was beaten by him and the country was destroyed, but the son didn't even think of helping." Chapter 267 Conqueror of Pontus. "Tell him I promised him, but he must offer us a lot of food," Livius said. Facing the powerful enemy Armenia, Livius also had to be cautious. Originally, the friends of the Romans should provide him with troops, but Livius could not trust Macraeus, and he would rather he provide food for himself. "Got it," Lysis continued, and then continued to report other things to Livius. Livius felt extremely helpless about this. Pontus was just being established, and there were too many decisions that needed to be made by him. Others could not replace his work at all. After being busy for most of the time, Livius felt extremely tired. "Lysis, do you think I should change my name?" Livius said. Lysis looked at him with some surprise. What did he mean by this? "For example, add Pontus to the end of my name. As the conqueror of Pontus, I think I have the right to do so." Livius said, "I think there is no problem." Lysis immediately followed suit and thought it was an extremely wise decision. Livius nodded. The name Lucius Posius Livius Pontus sounded very impressive. It would be even better if he added Germanus or Britannicus. So today Livius worked diligently on his official duties, but he added Pontus to the end of all his signatures. With the fall of Amidst, the entire Pontic War came to an end, and Livius decided to make Pontus a province. The news quickly spread back to Rome, causing a huge sensation. The decades-long Pontic War finally ended in Livius' hands. Although Mithridates was still at large, it was still a great achievement. What made Crassus and others jealous was that Livius actually added Pontus, conqueror of Pontus, to the end of his name. This was an achievement that many consuls could not achieve in their lifetime. But Livius did it so easily. How can he be like this? He became the conqueror of Pontus at such a young age. Crassus felt his eyes were red, and he could not calm his jealous mood no matter what. "Conqueror of Pontus? How interesting," Spartacus said after lying in the dungeon and listening to curious words. Because he had been participating in the underground arena recently, he suffered a lot of injuries, so he could only find a way to heal his injuries. "I didn't expect the general to be so powerful. He recovered Galatia and Bithynia so quickly and defeated Pontus." Curious said. "Do you regret being a deserter?" Spartacus asked. "A little bit, but I have good news. I have contacted my family, and they said they would find a way to buy me and give me freedom." Curious said. But he was destined to be disappointed. What he didn't know was that in order to avoid accidents, Livy had already told Quintus in a letter that he must never resell these deserters or give them freedom. "Congratulations, this is the best news I have heard today," Spartacus said. "Wait until I get out. I'll find a way to get you out." Curious said. "No, if you can, just help me find out about Sarah." Spartacus said. "No problem." Curious said. At this time, Lamer led some lightly dressed female slaves in. Seeing this, the gladiators cheered, and some even whistled. "Diona, you are mine, no one can compete with me. Myra, my beauty, come to accompany me later. Don't fight, come one by one," Lamer said with a smile. Then he walked to Castus' room. "Castus, you won 2 victories last week, but you drank too much wine. How many women do you want?" 3, Castus said with a smile, and then picked the 3 most beautiful ones from the female slaves. "What a greedy guy." Lamer shook his head, and then he went into Enomamus' room. Curious looked at all this with envy, but unfortunately he didn't participate in the gladiatorial contest, didn't make any money, and couldn't enjoy all this. "Do you want it?" Spartacus said with a smile. "I haven't touched a woman for a long time, but I don't think I can let Phoebe down." Curious said. "What a good man," Spartacus said. Not long after, Lamer walked into Spartacus' room. At this time, the dungeon was full of panting and groaning. "Hey, Spartacus, you have won 10 victories and made a lot of money. Do you want to have some fun?" Young people should be more romantic, otherwise they will not be able to do it when they are old. Lamer said with a smile. "No, I want to save money to buy my wife." Spartacus shook his head. "What a man who doesn't understand romance." Lamer said, "By the way, there is one more thing. There may be 2 distinguished guests coming to visit tomorrow. You should be ready. They may watch your performance." "They? Who are they?" Curious asked. "Julia and Cybele, the women of the conquerors of Pontus and the Holy Church prophet," Lemaire said. Spartacus and Curious looked at each other in surprise. They didn't expect to meet Levi's family. "How is the restaurant decorated?" Quintus said excitedly. "It's already decorated," Lydia said. "What about the garden?" "Absolutely no problem." Lydia looked helpless. Quintus had asked this question 800 times. Because of the visit of Julia and Cybele, Quintus was so excited that he didn't sleep well last night. He still has dark circles under his eyes, but this is understandable. Levi hasn't stepped into their house for several years, since he refused to help that time. They can see his alienation. "No, we must check it again," Quintus said, and then hurriedly left here. Lydia shook her head. But she still did her best to arrange everything. She knew that Quintus was eager to enter the official career, and if he wanted to be an official in Capua, Levi was the hurdle he could not avoid. As long as he could deal with Julia and Cybele, his wish would definitely come true. Under the command of Quintus and Lydia, everyone was busy, and finally waited for Julia's visit. Led by Sinas and a team of majestic soldiers, Julia and a little boy came to Quintus's mansion. "I'm so sorry, Cybele can't come because of something urgent," Julia said apologetically. Although Quintus was a little disappointed, he did not show it. "It doesn't matter, you are busy. This is what you should do." "But we haven't seen each other for a long time, my dear lady. You are getting more and more beautiful." Chapter 268 Competition. "Ha ha ha, Quintus, you are so sweet," Julia said. "This is not flattery, but sincere praise," Lydia said. "Is this lovely little Angie your son?" "Yes, he can't sit still at home recently, so I took him out to play," Julia said with a loving face. "Boys are like this," Quintus said with a smile. "Come in quickly, I have prepared a luxurious banquet for you." "Are there gladiator matches?" "Sinas told me that there are gladiator matches here," little Levi said. "Of course, no matter when you come, I can prepare a private gladiator match for you." Quintus was overjoyed and said quickly, "Levi, you are still young. Don't watch these." Julia frowned and said, "It's not a real fight, just watching them train, and little Aeneas and the others have already watched the match." Little Levi said dissatisfiedly that Julia was too controlling and didn't allow this or that. Unlike Aeneas, who was like a wild child, not only often went in and out of the arena, but also fought every day. "Madam, don't protect the children too strictly, it's not good for their growth." At this time, Sinas said, "Well, remember not to run around." Julia thought for a while and said, "Yeah." Little Levi nodded excitedly, and then rushed into Quintus's house screaming, "Ha ha ha, the child is so cute. We have always wanted a son." Lydia said with envy, "Queen Juno will definitely fulfill your wish," Julia said, and then everyone walked into Quintus's mansion. The gladiators who were training in the backyard suddenly found that there were a few more people on the stands on the second floor, and one of the children was watching the gladiators excitedly. If anyone was the most touched, it must be Julia. In the past, she often accompanied Levi to watch her own gladiators like this, but unfortunately everything has changed now. "Who is the most powerful among them?" little Levi asked. "That, his name is Castus. He was the champion of Capua last year." Quintus pointed to a gladiator who was training and said, "I heard Aeneas talk about them. His martial arts are amazing. He killed 5 people in one competition." Little Levi said with admiration, "No matter how good he is not as good as your father. Your father is the best." Quintus flattered Levi a little. Little Levi immediately raised his head proudly. "Of course, my father is the conqueror of Pontus. This time he defeated at least 50 legions of enemies." Everyone laughed, and Julia gently touched his head. "I heard that the master gave you 13 gladiators. Why don't you let them gather together for the ladies to see?" At this time, Sinas said, "No problem, Dokat. Stop training first and let Spartacus and the others gather together." Quintus said to the trainer. "Understood, master," Dokat said. Soon Dokat called Spartacus and others over. Spartacus looked at Sinas angrily. If he could, he would kill Sinas right now. Sinas secretly made a beheading gesture to him and looked at him with contempt. A slave dared to go against him. General Levi is really good at identifying talents. One of them is very strong and may become the champion of Capua in the future, Quintus said. Oh, really? Which one? Julia asked. It's him, Spartacus. He participated in 10 gladiator competitions and won all of them, Quintus said. Julia took a look at Spartacus. The tattoos on his body disgusted her. Some barbarians always do these weird things. He will participate in the competition so soon? How long did he train? Julia asked in confusion. A normal gladiator must train for at least half a year before he can participate in the competition. This, Quintus hesitated and couldn't say it. If he told them that he had only trained for a month, would it be suspected of abusing him? You know. He was a gift from Levi. This person is very strong. There is no problem for him to participate in the competition now, just like the general at the beginning, SYNOPSIS said. Julia's eyes narrowed slightly. She had a deep impression of the general, as someone who dared to kidnap Levi. She didn't have a good impression of him, and her impression of Spartacus was also not good. SYNOPSIS was secretly proud of himself. His goal was achieved. Who is stronger between him and Castus? Little Levi asked. SYNOPSIS rolled his eyes and said, why don't we let them compete? But he seems to have injuries. Little Levi pointed at the bandages on his body and said, how many gladiators are not injured? And it is their honor to perform for you, Quintus said. This is a rare opportunity. If he can attract little Levi's interest, come to his house often, so that they will be familiar with each other. Well then, little Levi thought for a while and said, Spartacus, Castus, prepare for the duel. Remember to use real swords. Quintus said to them, what's the point of just dueling? I think we should add a prize. SYNOPSIS said, what prize? Quintus asked. No matter who wins, we will fulfill his small wish, but of course this wish can't be too excessive. SYNOPSIS said. Quintus thought for a while and said to Julia, what do you think, madam? I think there is no problem. Julia said, since madam has spoken, then it's like this. Spartacus, Castus, no matter who wins, I can fulfill your one wish that is not too excessive. Quintus said. Spartacus was overjoyed. Can I buy Sarah? No problem, Quintus said generously. He must not be stingy in front of Julia. This is really great. He must win this game no matter what, Spartacus thought. SYNOPSIS looked at him with pity. He probably didn't know who had Sarah now. If he knew, he would never think so. Should he tell him the news and make him fall into despair? It was exciting just thinking about it. It seems that you are very motivated, Castus said with his two swords, with a cynical smile on his face. I will win this game no matter what, Spartacus said with a serious face. The newcomers nowadays are really motivated, so I will let reality tell you who is the king of Capua. Castus sneered. Okay, don't say any more. Are you ready? Docus said. The two nodded almost at the same time. The game begins. As soon as he finished speaking, Spartacus rushed towards Castus with a shield in one hand and a dagger in the other, and then stabbed him fiercely with a sword. Chapter 269 Victory. Castus sneered. He stepped aside to avoid the dagger, and then stabbed Spartacus in the face. SYNOPSIS watched all this coldly. It would be best if Castus accidentally killed Spartacus in the battle. This would be the best result. Seeing the two fighting fiercely, Levi was so excited that his face turned red. It was really amazing. Who do you think is most likely to win? Levi asked. Of course it's Castus. He is the champion of Capua. In Capua, no one can beat him, Quintus said with great confidence. Spartacus wants to win unless the sun rises from the west. SYNOPSIS laughed. Julia frowned and didn't speak, because she found that Spartacus's strength was only slightly weaker, and the key was that he was fighting desperately. Once a person doesn't want to die, even Castus will be a little flustered. Castus looked at Spartacus angrily. It's just a promise that's not too excessive. What do you think Quintus, the miser, will promise you? By the way, he wanted to buy his wife. No wonder he fought so hard. Thinking of this, a trace of tenderness appeared in Castus' eyes, and he thought of his wife far away in Gaul. At this moment of distraction, Spartacus suddenly threw the small shield in his hand. Seeing this, Castus hurriedly dodged, but he was still half a beat slower, and the small shield hit half of his head. Castus felt dizzy and a lot of blood flowed from his nose. When he opened his eyes, he found that Spartacus's dagger was on his neck. His eyes were extremely fierce, just like a real vicious one. Everyone was stunned to watch all of this. How could this be possible? The Capua champion actually lost, especially Quintus. He never thought that his trump card would lose to Spartacus. What a wonderful game, Julia said, but sighed in her heart. It's getting more and more like it. This is another general. Spartacus wins, gladiator trainer Dokat said. Congratulations, you are an amazing guy. Castus smiled and stretched out his hand. You're welcome. You are also very strong. Spartacus held his hand tightly. It took Quintus a long time to calm down. He didn't expect that Levi's gift to him would actually include such a rough jade, and he didn't even notice it. As expected, Levi had such a sharp vision. He said to Spartacus, "Spartacus, tell me your wish." "I want to buy back my wife Sarah." Spartacus said. "Okay, I will do my best to help you realize your wish," Quintus said. At this time, Spartacus's identity was different. Being able to defeat Castus meant that he was a huge cash cow again. It was reasonable to meet some of his requirements. Sinas sneered. It was really pitiful. After the lady left, he would tell him the truth and let him fall into endless despair. After Caesar left, Levi fell into a busy life. There were too many things to do after occupying a country, suppressing rebellions in various places and distributing spoils to Roman soldiers kept Levi busy. In addition, he had to prepare for the march to Armenia. As a time traveler, he knew that Tigranes, the king of kings, would never agree to his request. A large number of troops were assembled on the border between Pontus and Armenia, and a large amount of food and supplies were collected from Pontus. In addition, in order to prevent the rebellion in Pontus, he decided to leave a legion of Roman troops and 3,000 Galatian soldiers. A groan came from Levi's room, followed by a long scream. Since Munim came to Talora yesterday, Levi has relaxed himself a little. Levi has been with her in his room since yesterday. Munim was also exhausted by Levi, but she still tried her best to support herself, and she satisfied whatever Levi asked, which made Levi feel more satisfied. Looking at Levi, who was a little tired, Munim entangled with him tightly. At the same time, he whispered, "Who is that woman outside? She looks pretty. Are you attracted to her?" Levi shook his head. "Her name is Sarah. She is a very important woman. I am not in the relationship with her that you think." "It doesn't matter. I don't mind at all. Why don't you let her in and let's play together?" Munim's eyes were as charming as silk, and she drew circles on Levi's chest. "This slut is really daring, a bit like Cybele." Levi glanced at her and did not continue to answer the question. "I heard that you sent someone to ask the King of Kings for Mithridates." Munim's eyes turned and asked in a delicate voice. "Yes, if the King of Kings refuses you. Do you really plan to invade Armenia?" "That's right. No one can protect Mithridates. Whoever protects him will die," Levi said. Munim said in a soft voice, "If you defeat the King of Kings, do you really plan to make Syria and Cappadocia your provinces?" "Yes, Tigranes has taken those lands for himself. I will take them back without any problem," Livius said. Munim was a little worried. His father was also very worried about Rome's expansion of territory. An aggressive Rome was the nightmare of many small countries. In this way, Galatia was completely surrounded by Roman provinces. In the long run, it seemed natural for Galatia to become a Roman province. "Armenia too?" "Yes," Livius said. His ambition this time, no, it was ambitious. He planned to conquer Cilicia, Pontus, Syria, Cappadocia and other places into Roman provinces in one fell swoop. According to his estimate, in addition to Bithynia, Rome could at least add 5 provinces. Of course, if Armenia could be conquered, he would also mind making Armenia a Roman province, so that there would be 6 provinces. You have to know that Rome only has 10 provinces now. He will be the general who has expanded the most territory since the founding of Rome. His achievements will far exceed Scipio. No one can compare with him. Munim's face showed a trace of worry. Levi's ambition was unexpectedly big. "Why, did someone send you to inquire about the news?" Levi slapped her arm hard and said, "Hateful." Munim felt a pain and pinched him lightly and said, "Indeed, someone asked me to inquire about the news and asked if I could change my mind." Levi secretly exclaimed that it was amazing. This idea was even on the pillow. Is it Antiochus and them? Yes. Chapter 270 Expedition. Tell them that this is impossible. Besides, they may not be able to become princes. Don't take the princehood as something that you must get. You may end up with nothing in the future. Levi said, don't worry about this kind of thing. Just be my woman. Got it. I said with a strong smile. Levi shook his head. Now he was not interested anymore, so he left the room where he had stayed for a day. At this time, a woman with fair skin, long brown hair and extremely beautiful appearance came over. This woman was Spartacus' wife Sarah. General, do you want to have breakfast? Levi glanced at the sky and found that it was already past 9 o'clock. He seemed to be really a bit lewd. Well, then, give me some. As you say, General. Not long after, Sarah ordered some servants to bring food. Levi drank a sip of milk and ate a few eggs. He found that Sarah's face seemed not very good. Have you been sleeping well recently? I found that you have dark circles under your eyes. Levi said. Nothing. I just have nightmares recently, Sarah said. Levi looked at her with some surprise. It was said that she had interpreted Spartacus' dream, and her interpretation was quite accurate. I remember you seem to be a priest. You can interpret dreams, right? This means that my future is not good, Sarah said lightly, and then glanced at Levi. This glance made Levi a little scared. Could there really be any gods in this world? We may have to go to war recently. It's not safe here. Go to Amelia tomorrow and go back to Capua with her, Levi said. As you say, General, Sarah said. By the way, remember to keep Munim's matter secret. I don't want her to know for the time being. Okay, General, can I ask you something? Sarah asked. Ask. I heard that Spartacus was given to a Roman as a gift by you. I wonder if you can pardon him, Sarah said. Levi smiled slightly. That's impossible. Everyone must pay the price for their actions. Deserters must be punished. I understand, General. Sarah looked sad. But when you get there, you can reunite with Spartacus. He is also in Capua, working as a gladiator under a man called Quintus Basiatus. Thank you, General. Sarah thanked her. Although all the signs showed that Levi had bad intentions towards her, at least now it seemed that Levi was still very good to her and rescued her from sinners. Go down. Sarah left here with a happy mood. Levi shook his head. For some reason, he felt that Sarah was not a simple person. Not long after, Lysis walked in. Report to the general. Caesar is back. Let him in quickly, Levi said with a smile. Soon, the dusty Caesar walked in. Although Caesar was still very young, Levi suddenly found that his hairline had moved back a little, and there was a tendency to develop towards the Mediterranean. It must have been hard on this journey, Caesar, Levi said. It was indeed hard, but I got a lot of information. Tigranes rejected our request and has been playing tricks on us, Caesar said angrily. As expected, this is really great, Levi thought. Then Caesar reported to Levi that the guide sent by Tigranes actually made Caesar and his team take a lot of detours. If it weren't for a Syrian slave who told Caesar the truth, Caesar might not have come back yet. Tigranes was not good to many nations. He hated the Greeks. He forced many Greeks from Cilicia and Cappadocia to migrate to Mesopotamia. Those people did not support him. He also did not like those barbarians. King Shibanus of Godini and many people sent me letters, saying that as long as our army arrived, they were willing to join our team, Caesar said. Levi nodded. Although the King of Kings conquered many countries, it was still a short time after all, and a stable rule had not been established. So who supports Tigranes? Levi asked. Besides the Armenians, the people who supported him the most were the Arabs. Tigranes liked the Arabs very much. He valued their business ability and moved them to Armenia. In addition, there were Assyrians, Albanians, Caesar said. Levi had been listening to him for a long time and had a general understanding of the situation in Armenia. The races in Armenia now are very mixed, with various barbarians standing side by side, and many barbarian chieftains claiming to be kings. Levi also liked this situation very much, because in this way he could claim to have captured a large number of kings. After listening to Caesar's report, Levi immediately decided to set off with his army and march into Armenia. Speed is the essence of war, and maybe Tigranes could be caught off guard. The endless Euphrates River basin was once the cradle of civilization, and the ancient Mesopotamian civilization was born here. This is the true source of Western civilization, and both Greek and Jewish civilizations have been deeply influenced by it. But now it seems a bit desolate. There are endless Gobi deserts everywhere. If it were not for the irrigation of the Euphrates River, this place might have become a restricted area for civilization. After a long journey and difficult crossing of the Euphrates River, Levi's army finally entered the Mesopotamian basin, which is the territory of Iraq in later generations. This is already the sphere of influence of Armenia. In a small town, after learning that it was the Roman army outside, the city gate suddenly opened, and a group of Greeks rushed out with laughter. Looking at this scene, Levi smiled on his face. He had encountered this situation many times. Along the way, many people came to greet them with food and drink. They were all slaves of Cilicia and Cartapacia. They were forced to migrate here after the destruction of Armenia. They had no good feelings towards Tigranes. They welcomed the arrival of the Romans. Compared with the evil Tigranes, the Romans had a very good impression of the Greeks, and there were even many Greek fans. Faced with this situation, every Greek knew what to choose. Great Roman general, you are the messenger sent by Zeus to rescue us. Every city in Sofia welcomes you very much. The city's municipal official said with a happy face. You have suffered a lot. After this war is over, you can go home, no matter where you want to go, Levi said. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a cheer among the Greeks. They could finally go home. They had had enough of this shabby place. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 271, Tigranozeta. But during the war, I hope you can accept my command and obey the orders of the officers I assign, Levi said. No problem. Please go to our city to rest. We can provide you with all kinds of supplies, the city official said. Levi nodded, and then walked in with the generals. How far are we from Armenia? Levi asked. Dear General, you still need to cross the Tigris River and cross the Taurus Mountains to enter Armenia, which will take at least 7 days. Tigranozeta is just south of the Taurus Mountains, the city official said. Tigranozeta is a city built by Tigranes, the king of kings, and is also a fortress in Armenia. He is currently drinking and having fun in this fortress he built. 7 days, it seems to be soon, Levi said. The arrival of Levi's army could not be concealed from the Armenians, and they quickly set off away in Armenia. In a mansion in Tigranozeta, a middle-aged man with a dignified face was arguing with a noble lady. Why are you taking the lead in this matter? Are so many ministers blind? Don't they know that Levi's army is coming? But you saw who reported it. You will die if you report it, the lady said angrily. Just yesterday, a spy told Tigranes the news that Levi's army was coming, but Tigranes didn't believe it at all and ordered his men to push him out and chop off his head. Faced with this situation, all the ministers were scared and decided to pretend that nothing happened, but only this middle-aged man insisted on reporting it to Tigranes again. Your Majesty has been very kind to me. I can only have the position I have today because of your Majesty's promotion. Do you think I can let him down? The middle-aged man said dissatisfiedly. Even so, you can't gamble with your life. You can think of other ways, the lady said. We don't have time. Levi's army will arrive at any time. Once they surround the city, no one can escape, the middle-aged man said. After that, he left here resolutely regardless of the lady's obstruction. Seeing this, the lady was angry. Arrived at the palace of Tigranes, because he was Tigranes' favorite, after being informed, he came to a palace smoothly. Tigranes, wearing a purple robe, was enjoying the graceful dance of several Arab girls with several ministers. Seeing the arrival of this middle-aged man, Tigranes was overjoyed. Miserabazanes, how do you think these Arab girls dance? The middle-aged man smiled bitterly. When did the former king of kings become like this? He didn't even know that the enemy had entered his door. Your Majesty, I have important military intelligence to report, Mizrabazanes said with a serious face. Tigranes' face was a little ugly. It was really disappointing. Those ministers also changed their faces slightly. He really didn't care about his life. Tigranes just pushed the spy out and beheaded him yesterday, and so soon there was someone who was not afraid of death and sent him to the door. Speak, Tigranes said with a dark face. Levi has led his army over Mount Taurus and may arrive here at any time. I hope your majesty will send troops to resist quickly, Mizrabazanes said sincerely. What Levi's army? Could it be that someone has deceived you? Tigranes said dissatisfiedly. He is the king of kings and has destroyed countless countries. I don't know how many people will tremble when they hear his name. If Mizrabazanes was not his favorite, he would have pushed him out and beheaded him long ago. Every word I said is true, and there is no falsehood, Mizrabazanes said. Okay, in this case, I will give you 10,000 troops. You go and capture Levi. Otherwise I will punish you, Tigranes said coldly. Mizrabazanes almost vomited blood. Levi's army might have 100,000 troops. Giving him 10,000 troops is like asking him to die. But looking at Tigranes' unfriendly eyes, he knew that he was really angry. If he continued to argue, the 10,000 troops might be gone, and he might even be arrested. You know, Tigranes is not a good-tempered person. As you wish, your majesty. I'll go now. After saying that, Mizrabazanes left here in despair. The ministers looked at him with pity, asking him to tell the truth, and now they have trapped themselves. Come on, ignore him, let's continue watching the dance, Tigranes said with a big laugh. The ministers hurriedly smiled and watched the dance. After leaving the palace, Mizrabazanes' face was as gloomy as water. Since your majesty does not believe that Levi's army is coming, then use a war to make him believe it. At the foot of Mount Taurus, more than 30 Galatian cavalrymen were scouting the road ahead for the army. They were only a small part of the scouts. Originally, the Numidian cavalry was the best at these things, but because their skin color was too conspicuous, Levi asked the Galatian cavalry to replace this work. A Roman cavalry captain led them along the road. The vegetation along the road was dense, and it was easy to ambush the enemy, so they explored very carefully. At this time, they saw a lot of smoke and dust in front of them. The cavalry captain quickly ordered the army to stop advancing, then looked around and found a small hill nearby, and quickly led them to the hill. Captain, look quickly, a Galaxian cavalry said. I saw a large cloud of smoke and dust in the distance, which was caused by the passage of a large army. In ancient times, some experienced veterans could roughly estimate the number of enemies through the smoke and dust, and this cavalry captain had this ability. Take 10 people to report to the general and say that about 10,000 enemy troops are approaching the camp, and there may be a large number of cavalry among them. I will take people to scout, the cavalry captain said to a Roman officer. Yes, captain. After that, the officer left here with 10 cavalrymen. Soon the news reached Livius, who was setting up camp at this time. In fact, Levi was very confused about this. He was about to lead his men to the enemy's capital, but why did the enemy only send so few people? Aren't 10,000 people just going to die? What's wrong with the enemy? To be cautious, he summoned many deputy generals and some barbarian kings and decided to send out heavy troops. In this way, even if there is an ambush, he can attack or defend. Microbacanes was leading the army forward, and he suddenly felt uneasy. This is a battlefield intuition produced by long-term combat, and this intuition has saved his life many times. Stop moving forward, Microbacanes said. After receiving his order, the entire army slowly stopped moving forward. Thank you very much for the reward from Guanzizai under the body tree. I feel that war is really difficult to write recently. My head is a little big. I hope to finish writing these quickly. Chapter 272 Ambush. What happened, General? A general asked. Microbacanes did not answer, but carefully observed the surroundings. The dense jungle gave him a gloomy feeling, as if there were countless armies hidden inside. At this moment, there was a burst of exciting trumpets, and a large number of troops emerged from all directions. No, we are ambushed. Kill them back, said Microbacanes. But it was too late. The Roman troops had surrounded the Armenian army and launched an attack. Microbarzanes felt that there were Roman troops everywhere, as if he was trapped in a vast ocean of enemies. "General, let's run," said one of his personal soldiers. Microbarzanes nodded. It would be stupid if he didn't run away at this time, so he killed back under the protection of his personal soldiers. But the Roman army was arranged in a neat formation. They waved their daggers and quickly and effectively harvested his soldiers. His personal soldiers were reduced at a speed visible to the naked eye. At this time, many Roman troops had already discovered him. His exquisite armor and a large number of personal guards showed his identity and status. "Catch him quickly. He is a high-ranking official in Armenia, the favorite of the King of Kings, Mizrabarzanes," Caesar said loudly. "It's you, Caesar." Mizrabarzanes quickly recognized the envoy sent by Levi, and he had received him before. "Death is the only fate for those who disobey the Romans," Caesar said proudly. The centurii immediately rushed forward and rushed towards Mizrabarzanes desperately. The Armenian cavalry desperately protected Mizrabarzanes. The two sides fought fiercely, but how could they be the opponents of the Romans who had an absolute advantage? The number of soldiers around Mizrabarzanes was getting smaller and smaller. Seeing this, he laughed bitterly. "Your Majesty, I am loyal to you. I hope my death can wake you up." After saying that, he cut his neck with a sword and fell to the ground. Seeing this, Caesar felt a pity. This was also a man who was not afraid of death. The war was over very quickly, except for a few who escaped. Almost all the soldiers were either killed or captured. The ambush that Levi had expected was completely gone. After interrogating the captives, Levi found out the reason. This made him laugh and cry. How did Tigranes get the title of King of Kings? So he ordered the army to continue camping and summoned all the generals to discuss the matter. Looking at the generals gathered together, Levi said, "Now we have penetrated deep into Armenia. I hope you can cheer up and don't make any mistakes. According to the intelligence I have received, in order to enrich the local population, Tigranes forcibly brought a large number of Greeks, Cappadocians, Assyrians and Gothini here. We should treat these people differently from Tigranes' die-hard Armenians and Arabs." Levi did not forget that when Crassus went on an expedition to Parthia, it was these Arabs who betrayed the Romans and brought the Romans to a dead end. At the beginning, Pompey gave those Arabs a lot of land. It can be said that they are a group of ungrateful people. Moreover, when Crassus attacked Parthia, they also firmly occupied the side of Parthia, so he decided to resolutely suppress the Arabs. "We don't have much food now, so food is our top priority. The only way to get food is to take food from the enemy. All the food of the Armenians and Arabs must be collected, and not a single grain should be left for them. If they resist, kill them. If they refuse to hand over food, then bring their whole family here. We must win over those ethnic groups who were forcibly relocated. Tell them that after this battle, they can return to their hometowns, and we will also collect their food, but only 20%. Livius said. Lucullus nodded slightly. "Pulling and beating, this can not only divide the enemy, but also intensify the internal contradictions of the enemy. Those Armenians and Arabs who have been robbed of all their food will of course be jealous of the Greeks and Cappadocians, and even ask them to hand over some of their food. In this way, the Greeks and Cappadocians will only be more loyal to them. Boldness, the task of collecting grain is now yours. I will also give you 2,000 cavalrymen, and you must do a good job of collecting grain." Livius said. "Yes, General." Boldness said quickly. "As for the others, follow me and march to Tigranosata tomorrow." Livius said. "Yes, General. Yes, General. Yes, General." What did you say? 10,000 troops were annihilated, and Mizrabarzanes died in battle? Hearing this news, Tigranes was shocked and even sobered up a little. How could the Roman army have penetrated deep into Armenia and wiped out his 10,000 troops? Are the defenders of Mesopotamia all pigs? Yes, the Roman army has too many people, at least 100,000, and we are no match at all. A general covered in blood said. In fact, he had a lot of complaints about Tigranes. The Roman army was so powerful, but only sent 10,000 people to fight. This was to let them die, but he didn't dare to show it. Everyone knew that Tigranes was a man who killed innocent people indiscriminately. If he said something wrong, he might be pushed out and beheaded. Tigranes couldn't sit still. They would never deceive themselves with the death of 10,000 soldiers. When he thought of Levi's 100,000 troops, Tigranes swallowed hard. He glanced at the ministers around him, and they were also terrified. Do they really have 100,000 people? Tigranes asked again. There are at least 100,000 troops surrounding us. In order to shirk responsibility, the general could only bite the bullet and say it. In fact, what he said was almost the same. Although Levi left part of the army to guard Pontus, plus the losses in the war, the number of troops was indeed only about 100,000. If the civilians were included, it was about 130,000. Your Majesty, I think we should retreat first, and then call on all places to come to the king. With the strength of our troops here, we are no match for the enemy. As long as the troops come to the king, we will fight a decisive battle with the Romans, and we will definitely defeat the Romans. At this time, a minister said, "That's right, as long as he has a large army. How can Levi be a match for your Majesty?" said another minister. Seeing the minister's advice, Tigranes also felt that it made sense. In fact, he was still very proud now. As the king of kings who destroyed many countries, he had his own pride. Chapter 273 Arabs. In that case, let's retreat to the Taurus Mountains and send people to tell the major tribes to send soldiers to help. Oh, and my father-in-law, send someone to apologize to him and tell him that if he wants to take back Pontus, it's better to join forces with me. Tigranes said. Tigranes' father-in-law was Mithridates Vi. Since he fled to Armenia, Tigranes treated him as a prisoner. He kept him in the swamp and ignored his request to restore his country. This is really arrogant at first and respectful later. Yes, Your Majesty. Yes, Your Majesty. Yes, Your Majesty. So Tigranes immediately led a large number of troops to leave the fortress, accompanied by a large number of ministers, and then entered the vast Taurus Mountains. When he arrived at Tigranosseta, Levi found that it was indeed a fortress, built on the mountain. The terrain is dangerous, and it takes a lot of time to capture it. At this time, a Roman cavalry captain ran over and reported to Levi, "Report to the general, we have captured some wealthy merchants who have fled. They told me that Tigranes has already escaped from the fortress and issued a call for the king to come to the king." The call for the king? What a familiar word. Levi smiled. However, Levi was not particularly surprised by this. If the defeat of an army of 10,000 could not wake up Tigranes, then he would be unworthy of being the king of kings. As for the call for the king, he did not take it seriously. At the beginning, Lucullus directly used the invincible power to defeat the 300,000 strong army of Armenia with less than 3 Roman legions and some allied forces. In addition, he also defeated the coalition forces of Armenia, Pontus and Parthia. There was no reason why he could not do it. Do you know where he fled to? The wealthy merchant does not know, but judging from the traces left by their horses, it should be the Taurus Mountains. The cavalry captain said, "The Taurus Mountains? There are high mountains and dense forests there." It must be said that Tigranes fled to a good place. Ordered Olabila to lead his troops to pursue and see if he can catch up with them. Levi said, "Although the possibility of catching up is not high, what if we are lucky?" "Yes, General," the cavalry captain said hurriedly. In an Arab tribe near Tigranosseta, some people have been in a state of panic recently, because of rumors that the Roman army has arrived here, and even the king has fled to Mount Taurus. This made the tribal chieftain Ariamnes extremely distressed. What should he do? Should he migrate with the tribe? Their tribe still maintains the tradition of living in tents, so it is easy to migrate, but now there is chaos and war. Where should they migrate? At this time, he heard a scream outside. This made him very angry. Those people are getting more and more unruly. But as soon as he walked out of the tent, his face changed, because he found that a large number of cavalry had rushed here and surrounded it. Some of these cavalry had very dark skin, like black charcoal, but some were very white, but they didn't look like Armenians. According to his long experience of traveling around, these should be Romans. The Romans actually came to his tribe, which was really terrible. Ariamnes forced a smile with difficulty. "Dear sirs, is there anything I can help you with?" "I, Ariamnes, love to help others the most." At this time, A young officer who was extremely handsome but had a receding hairline came over. "Are you Arabs?" He frowned and said, "Yes." Ariamnes smiled. "Where is your food?" Caesar asked. "Sir, what do you mean?" Ariamnes asked cautiously. "Asshole, just answer whatever I ask you. Why are you talking so much nonsense?" At this time, a Roman soldier kicked him and knocked him to the ground. Ariamnes felt a sharp pain in his stomach and hated these Romans in his heart. It was too barbaric. The Arabs were also indignant, but there were more and more Romans around them, so they had to suppress their anger. "Hand over all your food, or die." Caesar kept an elegant smile on his face, but his words made all the Arabs feel cold. An Arab man said angrily, "You asked us to hand over all the food, then what will we eat?" "You are so talkative." A Roman soldier standing near him directly stabbed his sword into his body. The Arab man covered his bleeding wound with an unbelievable look on his face, but finally fell down. Ariamnes' face was full of fear. These Romans were playing for real. "I don't want to say it a second time. Hand over all the food and weapons, or die," Caesar said. He looked at the cattle and sheep around him. This tribe raised a lot of cattle and sheep, at least a few thousand, in addition to a small number of war horses. It seems to be a big tribe. If all these cattle and sheep can be driven back to the army can improve its food. "Okay, we will hand it over," Ariamnes said with a painful face. After that, he ordered the Arabs to hand over all the food, and the Arabs could only obey his orders helplessly. Some Romans even rushed into the tent and began to rummage through the boxes and cabinets, collecting all the valuables and then gathering them together. Some Arabs tried to resist, but they were killed without hesitation by the Numidians or Romans. Looking at the bodies lying in a pool of blood, Ariamnes roared in anger in his heart, "A bunch of damn robbers! Pick 50 of them to help us drive these things back to the army." Caesar pointed to the cattle, sheep and war horses and said. Several Roman officers faithfully carried out his orders, and 50 men including Ariamnes were picked out. At this time, something happened that made them tear their eyes out. The Romans actually set fire to the tents, and all the tents were burning. "Remember, go to your King of Kings for food. This is the end of going against Rome," Caesar said coldly. After that, he left with the cattle, sheep, food, gold and silver. The remaining Arabs looked desperate. They had to find food as quickly as possible, otherwise they would all starve to death. There were crowds of people outside a small border town in Armenia. Tigranes personally went out of the city to welcome the army that came all the way to defend the king. Because this army of loyalists was very special, because they came from the faraway Arabian Peninsula. "Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that even you would come from afar. This really makes me very happy." Tigranes laughed loudly. Chapter 274 Cannon Fodder. After escaping from the Taurus Mountains, Tigranes would never forget the humiliation. The Roman army chased him day and night, and one army after another that came to defend the king was defeated by them. Tigranes was like a frightened bird. He continued to lead his men to flee at the slightest sign of trouble. He originally planned to flee to the royal city, but after receiving the news that Livy's army was about to go to the royal city, he had to flee to a small town far away from the royal city. At the same time, he sent people to recruit soldiers everywhere, not only recruiting mercenaries from neighboring countries, but also recruiting soldiers from his own country. Some tribes robbed by Livy had nowhere to go and could only serve Tigranes. In addition, a large number of barbarians came to serve, and his army expanded like a balloon, and soon reached a huge number of 300,000 people, which made Tigranes full of confidence. The fear of Livy was also swept away. He believed that with such a large army, he could definitely defeat Livy's army easily. "Great King of Kings, I heard that the Romans dared to offend you, so I brought the warriors of my tribe and traveled thousands of miles, bypassing Babylon and coming from the sea." An Arab chief said respectfully, "I knew that you Arabs are my best friends. As long as you defeat Levi, I will give you a lot of land." Tigranes said, "That's great. You are the most generous king in the world." The Arab chief said happily. Tigranes led them into the royal city. Alexander looked at all this with a gloomy face. He led part of the army to support Tigranes on the order of Mithridates. Tigranes had been overwhelmed by the huge military force. At first, He could listen to his persuasion and try to avoid Levi's edge, but he found that he had shown his intention to fight him from time to time. Don't you look at those barbarians? Most of them don't even have a set of armor, they only have a knife or sword, and some are hanging various large gold chains. Such an army reminded him of the Pontic army that fought Sulla. Was it a complete replica of the Pontic army? Sometimes numbers really don't determine everything. He thought he should write a letter to Mithridates. Maybe he shouldn't come to join Tigranes so soon. On this day, Tigranes hosted a banquet for all the chiefs and kings. All kinds of chiefs and kings gathered together, drinking big bowls of wine and eating big chunks of meat. It was so lively. Tigranes' face was also full of red, as if he had won a great victory. Your Majesty, our army currently has 270,000 infantry and 55,000 cavalry. Who can resist such a force? As long as the army arrives, the Romans may be scared to surrender. A Scythian tribal chieftain held a large piece of ribs in his hand, with wine stains on his beard, and smiled proudly. That's right. The Romans have always called us barbarians. They think they are nothing. Today I will let them know how powerful we are. An Arab chieftain said bitterly. Tigranes also nodded repeatedly. With 330,000 troops in hand, he felt that there was no country he could not conquer. Moreover, the Romans were attacking his royal city, which made him unable to sit still any longer. If the royal city was conquered, it would be a major event that would shake the foundation of the country. So he was more inclined to fight a decisive battle with Levi. Your Majesty, many of our soldiers have only been in the army for a month. They do not have complete armor and have not received systematic training. Many troops cannot even hear the orders clearly, and they do not speak the language. I think we should give them some time to get used to each other and equip the army with more armor before fighting a decisive battle with Levi. At this time, Alexander stood up and said, "Bah! You coward! You are so scared after being defeated by Levi. My men are all warriors selected from 100. One of them can fight at least 10 Romans. If those Romans really dare to come, I will definitely make them come and never return." At this time, a barbarian chief said disdainfully, "You're right. Those Pontic people have been scared out of their wits by the Romans. A bunch of bastards who are scared out of their wits." All kinds of dirty words came out of the mouths of those barbarian chiefs. Although he couldn't understand some of the words, he knew from their eyes that they were not good words. Alexander was furious. What did these barbarians know? They were just a bunch of reckless men. Okay, everyone, stop talking. Alexander also has good intentions, Tigranes said. After all, Alexander represented Mithridates, so he had to give him some face. And Levi is so bold that he dared to attack my royal city. We will march into the royal city the day after tomorrow. Tigranes said heroically, "Your Majesty is wise. Kill those little Romans." Looking at the chiefs and kings who were in high spirits, Alexander shook his head gently. He had no confidence in this battle. He decided to write a letter to Mithridates, persuading him not to come and join them. The Armenian royal city of Artaxata is located on the banks of the Eryx's river. It is a famous fortress. After Syria was defeated by Rome, Hannibal fled to Armenia. He not only proposed various suggestions for enriching the country and strengthening the army, but also helped design this fortress. The entire fortress is surrounded by a curved river on 2 sides, so it only needs to defend 2 walls. After a long period of preparation, the Roman army began to attack the city. One by one, the catapults were throwing huge stones into the air, and then they fell heavily on the royal city. A large number of stone fragments kept falling, and the entire city wall looked shaky. The Armenian soldiers on the city wall watched all this in horror. How could the Romans have such a terrifying catapult? At this time, Ariamnes and many men who refused to hand in food were gathered by the Roman army. These days, their lives were extremely hard. The Romans only gave them a small piece of black bread and a small amount of water every day, which made these people dizzy with hunger. For a little food, they didn't know how many fights they had. Ariamnes was lucky because he had to help the Roman army herd cattle and sheep. At this time, he could secretly drink some goat milk and cow milk. Even so, he often felt hungry. At this time, some Roman soldiers took out buckets of black bread and water. Seeing this, Almost all Arabs and Armenians' eyes lit up and their stomachs grumbled. These things were so cute. If it weren't for the daggers in the hands of those Romans, they would have rushed up to fight for these foods. Everyone, today will be the day when Artaxata will be captured. We need to select a group of warriors from among you, and the first batch will attack after the city is captured. If any of you want to participate, you can get 2 pieces of black bread and a lot of water. A military tribune said to them. Chapter 275 Rival. I do. Arabs and Armenians said one after another, even Ariam's was no exception. It's nothing to let a person starve for a day, but it's terrible to let a person be hungry all the time for several months. Hunger has long become their inner demon. As long as they are given some food, they are willing to do anything. Very good. Those who want it, come forward to get the bread, and then you can choose your own weapon, whether it's a sword or a knife, the military tribune said with a sneer on his face. What a group of pathetic guys. They can survive by donating their own food, but they have to take the most dangerous task for 2 pieces of black bread. If they can choose again, I don't know what they will choose. These Arabs and Armenians ignored his ridicule. In their eyes, even a lovely black bread is much more important than this. They lined up neatly under the whip of the Roman soldiers, and then began to receive black bread and water. Almost everyone who received the black bread would gobble it up, as if they were eating the supreme delicacy. With 2 large pieces of black bread to fill their stomachs, they felt a little stronger, but it still couldn't satisfy their needs. Every cell in their body kept telling them one message, that is, hunger. However, the Roman officers told them that as long as they captured the royal city, they could eat as much as they wanted, which made these hungry people cheer. Listen to my command for a while. If we stick together, we have a greater chance of survival, Ariamnes said to his men. His men nodded in agreement. The Roman soldiers led them to the front of the army. Some Roman soldiers held crossbows and looked at them vigilantly. It was obvious that if they made any unusual movements, they would soon be pierced by thousands of arrows. Seeing this, some people who were originally restless immediately became honest. There were a pile of weapons and shields on the ground, but no armor. These were weapons seized by the Roman army. The Roman officers did not let them pick up the weapons and shields, but asked them to watch quietly. Boom! At this moment, a wall collapsed, making a deafening sound. Livius nodded slightly. He did not order the troops to attack, but let the catapults continue to throw stones, trying to knock down more walls. The situation went very smoothly. One section of the wall after another was knocked down. Livius finally gave the order to attack. The loud trumpets sounded, the military flags waved, and the Roman army finally launched an attack. Quick, pick up a weapon and a shield, and then go forward to attack the city. Don't pick up more, otherwise you will be punished by military law, a Roman officer said. Ariamnes immediately went forward to pick up a scimitar and a shield, which were their favorite weapons, and his men also chose the same weapons. At the urging of the Roman officers, they rushed to the gap in the wall, and some Thracians and Galatian troops followed them. Seeing a large number of enemy troops approaching, arrows soon rained down on the wall. Many Armenians have good archery skills, so these arrows are very accurate. Many Arabs and Armenians were shot by arrows and then wailed, "Stop, we are Armenia!" An Armenian shouted, "But how could the people on the wall believe it? Don't you see what you have in your hands? And there are a lot of enemy troops behind." Ariamnes used his shield to carefully protect himself. Arrows shot at the shield, but only one shot through his hand, nailing his hand to the shield. A lot of blood flowed from his hand, but Ariamnes felt that he could still bear it. Compared with some people who were shot from both sides, he was undoubtedly lucky, but the hunger and pain emanating from his body made him angry. He stepped over the collapsed wall and shouted, "Kill these people!" Then he took the initiative to kill the Armenian army that was coming. His men were stunned, but soon understood. Even the royal city was breached. So how far is Armenia from being destroyed? It's time to stand in line. So they followed Ariamnes and began to fight with the Armenian army. At the beginning, they suffered heavy casualties. After all, they were weak due to lack of food for a long time. But when more and more Thracians and Galatians poured in, the situation was completely reversed. They defeated the army of the royal city and soon occupied the city wall. A smile from the heart appeared on Levi's face. The royal city was taken. At this time, a scout rushed over on a war horse. "Report to the general. We found a large enemy army 10 miles away from here. According to visual estimation, the number is at least 300,000. Hearing this, Levi's face changed drastically. "How many did you say?" "Boundless. The number is at least 300,000. Levi couldn't help cursing. Why did the enemy arrive at this critical moment? Part of the army has already attacked the royal city. It would be too demoralizing for them to withdraw now. What should we do, General? Should we let the people in the city withdraw?" Bullis asked. Levi thought for a while, and finally shook his head. "Tell the troops that have entered the city to continue the attack, and we will go to meet the enemy." When Lucullus entered Armenia, he only had about 3 legions of soldiers in his hands, except for the Thracians and Galatians. Now he can mobilize 8 legions. He doesn't believe that he is not as good as Lucullus. Not far from the royal city, an extremely large and endless army is slowly approaching the royal city. "Ha ha ha, Alexander, your strategy is really good. In this way, we can attack them from both sides," Tigranes said with a big laugh. "It's just that people didn't expect that they actually broke into the royal city. In this way, their army must have suffered heavy casualties, and retreating will shake the morale of the army." Mithridates said with a smile. Alexander listened to the praise of everyone with reserve. In fact, he didn't expect Levi to break into the royal city so quickly. "This is even better. I guess Levi must be very distressed." However, Mithridates did not listen to his advice, but brought his soldiers to join Tigranes, because Levi was too strong, and this was probably the only chance to defeat Levi. If this failed, Pontus and Armenia would fall, and Alexander agreed that he had indeed not considered it carefully at the beginning. Tigranes was also scared, but fortunately he arrived in time. If his queen and prince fell into Levi's hands, he really couldn't imagine the consequences. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.